All righty, Jane. What's happening?
I'm here.
You are here.
Excited.
You made it. I'm excited too. Thanks for doing this. Appreciate
Yeah.
it. So your story is a very fascinating story. You got a brain injury, and you decided to make a game to help your brain recover. Mm-hmm. Now, what led you to even attempt something like that? I've never heard of anything like that in the past.
Well, I had been designing games professionally and researching them for 10 years by the time I hit my head. And it was not my first instinct. Oh, I have a brain injury. Let me make a game. But, you know, about a month into the recovery, I wasn't getting any better. I was really depressed and anxious. It was like the lowest point of my life. And I knew from my research that when we play games, you know, we have more optimism, we're more determined, we're better able to ask people for help, right, to team up with us, be your allies. And I just figured, well, this is like the worst I've ever felt in my life. Maybe if I can bring some of that gameful spirit to recovery, I could kind of jumpstart my brain back into healing.
So what was the nature of your injury?
It started out as just a normal concussion. And
how did you get it?
So this is my public service announcement for the episode. I was standing up from underneath an open cabinet, and I'm a runner, so I have really strong legs, and I was just in a hurry, and I was just full force right up into the corner of the cabinet, hit my head, and it was like classic, you know, my husband was joking around, you know, who's the president, and I couldn't remember who the president was, and I was like, oh, shit, that means it's bad. Yeah,
After you got hit in the head, you couldn't remember. This is Barack Obama.
And all I could remember was it's not George Bush anymore. But I couldn't remember who it was.
Wow. So just standing up and hitting the edge of the cabinet, it was an open cabinet door?
It was an open cabinet. So the PSA is, you know, shut cabinet doors. Because apparently, I've now learned, after this happened to me, that this happens to a lot of people. And you can get a serious head injury as like a football player by doing this. So... Ow.
Wow. So just standing up. So you stood up quick, bam, whacked your head. Did you go unconscious?
I did not go unconscious. You know, saw stars and everything. But, you know, a lot of concussions, it takes a few hours. The brain starts to swell, and it's not till later that day that you really start to feel like something's really wrong. So...
is that what happened to you?
Yes. Yeah. And, you know, there's no internal bleeding or anything. And so, you know, the doctor said, oh, you'll be fine. And, you know, give it a week, maybe a couple weeks. I come back after a month. They tell me, oh, you know, some people, if it doesn't heal in the first month, it takes 3 months. And if it doesn't heal in 3 months, it might be a year. And if it's not a year, maybe you're stuck like this forever. Were
you experiencing the classic symptoms, like you couldn't like stare at the sun, the sunlight would bother your eyes, loud noises?
Oh, I mean, all light. Like if I would try to go into like a Whole Foods, the fluorescent lights would feel like I was like under fire from weapons. I mean, I was in bed basically for 3 months. Everything, like all stimulus would make me nauseous and migraines and everything. So it started out normal concussion, but then it's kind of unraveled into what they call post-concussion syndrome, which is a thing that I didn't know existed. But a lot of people, the concussions take up to a year to heal. Yeah,
they can. Well, I from working for the UFC, I've seen people that neglect those.
Yes,
and it gets really ugly.
Yeah.
And I've also seen people that were great fighters. There's a guy named TJ Grant who was in line for a UFC title shot. Got a concussion, not even from getting kicked or punched. It was from a grappling exchange, just bonked his head on something. I believe it was somebody's knee or someone's hip or something like that, and then was never the same again and has never fought again. And it's been like, I think, almost 2 years.
Yeah, and I mean, that's something I've gotten actually pretty active in the research community and trying to share information. So it turns out like the first week of recovery can really determine if you're going to go into this extended, you know, it's going to take you 3 months, 6 months, a year, if you're not resting enough in that first week.
So the first week, it's critical that you just do nothing?
I mean, they call it cognitive rest, and basically you want to not do anything that feels difficult for you. And so for me, I couldn't read. I could only watch TV shows I'd already seen before because having to process new plot was not was not helpful. So I was like rewatching Buffy the Vampire Slayer because I'd seen them all like a million times. And yeah, keep the lights off if they, keep sunglasses on indoors. But the first 48 hours and then after that, the first week, if you can avoid over stressing your brain, you have a much better chance to recover within the 1 to 2 week period as opposed to people. Yeah, and people don't know. People I tried to go right back to work. I was in the middle of writing my first book, and it was due in a couple months. And I'm like, I can't miss my deadline. I've got to do this. I got to power through. I mean, I can barely. I'm like, can't even see the screen. But when you have a concussion, you're not thinking clearly. You are not a rational person. You're just like, I have to do this. I have to try. And other people will look at you and be like, what's wrong with you? You are totally out of it. Why are you trying to work? But you don't have that same kind of rational decision-making ability. So sometimes, a friend or, a loved one needs to take you aside and say, I'm not letting you do anything for this first week. You've just got to let your brain heal. And
this is, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's relatively new, our understanding of what takes place after a concussion and what you have to do to recover.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, there's just last year, there was a big study that came out showing that 4 months after a concussion, your brain is still different. There's still, it's like a kind of a scarring that happens, like a scab, that certain parts of the brain will still be thickened for months after, even if you think you're feeling fine, which means that you're still vulnerable. If you were to get hit again, it would be more dangerous. And if you're still feeling symptoms after 4 months, that's why it's like when you cut yourself open and you get the scab, you can't be picking at the scab by doing things that are triggering your symptoms. Yeah.
Wow. So who was it that told you got to settle down?
Oh, well, my doctor said that. And of course, I'm a science geek. I have a PhD. It's like my background. And I was having my husband do Google Scholar searches for traumatic brain injury research because I couldn't use the computer. It's like, you got to figure, is this normal? I'm like, I started feeling suicidal. That was new for me. And I'm like literally having him Google suicidal thoughts,
Jesus.
Concussion, because I'm like, am I really suicidal? Like, am I rationally thinking I'm never going to be able to work again? My husband's going to have to take care of me. I should just end it, which is what the voices in my head were saying. But it didn't feel, that didn't feel like myself. And so fortunately, he was finding articles like, wait, 1 in 3 people with a concussion have suicidal thoughts. And that is actually a reaction to the neurochemistry. When you have a concussion, you don't have dopamine in the reward pathways, which means your brain can't anticipate anything good in the future. You become like completely unable to imagine that you'll feel better, that good things will happen for you. And that's just like a perfect neurochemical foundation for suicide.
So you were able to remember how you used to think. And so you knew, this is not the way I think.
Yeah. I mean, I was able to distance myself a little bit from the thoughts where, because I was just at home, I wasn't going anywhere. I would say to my husband, like, I feel like I have this voice that's saying, you should kill yourself. And I would talk about it because I think if you talk about it, it becomes less, this feeling that you have to really believe and more like this thing that you can look at and try to figure out. And,
right.
And so it was like, it just felt so weird to me because I'm like, why? I don't know. I never had that before. And once I knew that it was a symptom of concussion rather than, oh, Jane has figured out that her life is terrible and logically she wants to kill herself, I was able to live with it. And, the research literature says they go away as the brain heals. So I just thought, okay, and, I might still hear that voice for, a few weeks or a few months, but I know that that's a symptom of healing and not how I actually feel. So I'm just going to get on with it.
Now, is there medication that you can take while this is going on? Anything that speeds up the healing or anti-inflammation medication?
Right. So
nutrients?
this is what's so hard about post-concussion syndrome is there's nothing that's been shown to speed it up. I mean, I was offered really powerful anti-anxiety meds, depression meds. I chose not to take them because I just didn't want to go down that road. I'd never taken them before.
Yeah.
And there's no known therapies. People have tried to do like oxygen, deep oxygen therapy, and
like hypobaric chambers.
yes,
that kind of thing?
yeah.
Did you try any of that?
I did not try that, but actually, this is sort of very exciting for me. Because there's no good treatment for this. When my game worked so well for me, and other people started using it, and it worked well for them. We were able to get a grant from the NIH to test this with young athletes through Ohio State University Medical Research Center. We just released our findings last week that the game that I invented did improve the post-concussion syndromes in 100% of the people who used it, compared to only 50% of people who didn't
Wow.
play. So this is one of the first validated treatments that can, reduce the headaches and the nausea and the confusion and the, difficulty.
So how did you get to the point where you wanted to experiment with a game? You're recovering slowly. Like, I mean, how slow is this taking? Like, how many months afterwards were you still kind of?
Well, it was 34 days, which I will never. I don't like it. It's emblazoned into my memory. 34 days after I hit my head, that I was completely desperate. I mean, I literally was saying to myself, I'm going to kill myself, or I'm going to turn this into a game, because I mean, I was...
Those two options are so strange.
I know, but...
You might be the only person in human history that's ever said that. I'm going to kill myself, or I'm going to turn this into a game.
Yes. Well, so I was in the middle of writing my first book, which was all about the psychology of games. And I just thought to myself, I got to prove it. I'm writing this book saying that playing games makes us happier and stronger and more resilient. I got to prove this theory. I mean, there's all other kinds of proof in the book, but I'm like, I'm going to live it. And that was just, I didn't know how else to provoke the positive emotions. And when we play games, and there's a whole list of positive emotions that we feel when we play games, like curiosity and excitement and awe and wonder and pride. And it's just like, I got to get some of these emotions, because my doctor had said the more depressed and anxious you are, that can actually slow down the healing process. It is actually detrimental. Right. If you can feed the depression, anxiety.
Detrimental in terms of measurable effects, or detrimental in terms of the way you feel? Like
that from the brain's ability to heal, the neurochemistry of depression is not conducive to that.
So literally being depressed can slow down the physical healing of the brain itself.
Yes.
Wow.
And so they're like, so try not to worry. And I'm like,
oh, Jesus.
I know. I was like, I can't get out of bed. My book's due. I can't write. My husband had lost his job a few months earlier. And I'm like, I may never work again. I'm going to be like a barista now. This is like, maybe if I can stand, the
light.
Yeah.
So the 34 days.
Yeah.
What is the 34 days were when it was at its worst? Is that?
Everyone kept saying, oh, you'll be fine in a few days, you'll be fine in a few weeks. And then I went and saw my doctor after 30 days. And then the doctor said, oh, yeah, by the way, some people don't get better in a month. Those people, it often takes 3 months. And for people who don't get better in 3 months, then it often takes a year. And if you're not better in a year, then you might be like this forever. And I was like,
whoa.
Oh, my God. It kind of freaked me out.
So did you experiment with things during this time? Like when you were researching?
I mean, the only thing that I really experimented with was trying to eat things with like omegas, omega-3, omega-6, which are supposed to be good for brain healing. And there is some scientific literature on that where, doctors will say eat walnuts,
Walnuts?
Yeah, because that's a good, it's available. Chew them up real good. As opposed to taking a capsule. You can absorb things better from food sometimes.
And what is walnut? Walnuts is
it's like omega-3, omega-6 fatty acids.
Better than fish oil?
I'm one of those weird vegans. So.
Oh, how dare you.
I know.
What about hemp oil? Does that have has a certain amount of it, right?
Hemp is good. Hemp is really good too. Yeah, but at the time, I don't know, the only thing I could kind of get it together to do was walnuts.
Okay, so walnuts were it.
Yeah.
Do you know who Bill Romanowski is?
What do I? That name sounds
Football.
familiar.
Well, he's a football player. He was a famous football player, and he suffered a lot of concussions and created something called Neuro One, and it's a nootropic blend, and he created it to deal with some of the symptoms that he had, or some of the repercussions from all the head trauma that he had.
Yeah,
so I was wondering if you had ever tried anything along those lines.
I have not. I know there are a lot of that sort of nutraceutical like interest in experimenting with that. I did not try that.
Because of the dopamine, I was wondering, like serotonin is like 5-HTP really good for rebuilding serotonin or building blocks of serotonin.
Yeah, I didn't get it together to try any of that.
So you were just really struggling.
I was struggling. I mean, I would sit on the bathroom floor and like cry for hours, but quietly. Like I didn't want my husband to freak out.
Oh, nice. Very polite in your depression. It seems counterintuitive to someone who doesn't know anything like me that you're saying that you could only watch like Buffy the Vampire Slayer because you'd already seen it before, but playing a game like isn't part of so stimulating.
Right. No, and actually I couldn't play video games. I would try to play like Peggle. I was like,
What's
Peggle will be easy. It's like a kind of pinball game where you shoot little pinballs around and pop pegs, and it's and they play like the Hallelujah chorus every level you complete. So it's like, yay, I'm successful. They're like playing a parade for me.
Right.
I'm like that'll really help me. But even that was too stimulating. So I couldn't play video games. So the game I invented was not a video game. I mean, we did eventually make an app and a web version so other people could play, but it was more like just a set of rules that I would follow. Like you would like, oh, how do you play hide and seek, or how do you play poker? You just like learn the rules and play. So I just started making up rules for myself about doing things that you would do in a video game, like collecting power-ups or spotting, like making a list of the bad guys and all the ways, like where they would show up and what my strategies were for fighting them, and coming up with a quest list. So like what's something I can do in the next 24 hours to feel better, like something concrete that I can accomplish. And so just starting to approach my recovery with these really concrete, gameful strategies. And really the first thing I did was I adopted this secret identity, like my avatar. I was going to have an avatar in my recovery, and that was Jane the Concussion Slayer, because I'm like, oh, I'm going to be like Buffy, and Buffy did not choose to be the Slayer, right? Like they just told her, you're the Slayer, you have to save the world. And I'm like, I did not choose to hit my head, so I'm going to be like her and just rise to the heroic occasion, and kind of try to tap into my sense of determination and being a badass. So.
And so what did you do, like, after you took on this persona or adopted the idea of this avatar? Like, what did you do? Like, what were your power-ups? Like, who were the bad guys? Like,
and bad guys were anything that would trigger my symptoms. So, bright lights, a crowded space, conversation, I mean, everything. But the thing with bad guys, and like, in a video game, like, oh, there's a monster, you don't run away. You got to figure out how you're going to tackle it or get past it. So, and the same is true with recovery from any kind of injury or illness. You have to keep testing the limits, right? Because otherwise you wind up never getting better. You kind of convinced that you're just flat on your back forever. And this is sort of an aside, but as I was doing all the research for this new book, I found out that the number one predictor of disability after a back injury is avoiding things that make your back hurt early on during recovery. So you would think like, oh, you have to, don't do anything that will make your back worse. But the longer you keep that mindset, that's the number one predictor of who becomes chronically disabled, not able to work, or their life is affected in a major way. And it's not the severity of the injury, it's not the severity of the pain. And so with all kinds of injury and illness now, because you get stuck in that pattern, you never really
So you get stuck thinking yourself is injured.
Yes, yeah. And so, it's like, but with all of these things, it's a careful balance. So you have to recognize that the bad guys are bad. I can't go out and be in a crowded space for 3 hours. I can't go to like a Lady Gaga concert, which I really wanted to do. I'm like, you're not going to do that. I said that as kind of like I'm like, the next time she comes through, that'll be like one of my epic wins when I can go see her. But like you can do little things to test. Let me go into the Whole Foods and see how many minutes I can make it before the symptoms come back. So you're kind of like testing. Oh, today it was 30 seconds. I got to leave. maybe next week it'll be 5 minutes. And then you kind of start to get your life back because you don't want to get on that course towards seeing yourself as kind of chronically disabled. So that's, you know, you come up with these ways to battle the bad guys, you know, every day. And in the version that we tested with the NIH, the game is activate 3 power-ups a day. So for me, that might have been eating walnuts or like cuddling my dog, because that made me feel like safe and happy. So anything that provokes a positive emotion, if you're depressed, I mean, you have to really find what are the things that can get through that depression and still make you feel good. So, you know, I'd cuddle my dog, I'd eat walnuts. Do you do 3 of those a day, 1 bad guy battle a day where you really test the limits to see if you're getting better, and 1 quest a day, which is the smallest possible thing you can do that will kind of move you in the direction of your goal or recovery or just feel like something productive that you want to do. So I remember one time my quest, I decided to bake cookies for the baristas at the coffee place down the stairs. I'm like, because I felt like I couldn't do anything for myself. So I'm like, I'm going to bake cookies for someone else today. And as a result, randomly, I wound up getting free coffee for a year because they were like, could not believe somebody came like down with this giant plate of like cookies fresh out of the oven. But I did not expect that. But that was just like, you know, find one thing I can do today that will have a positive impact. And that's the sort of, there's other stuff, you know, in the game, but that's sort of the main, you're basically using game models to kind of structure your life to make sure that you're staying engaged, not hiding, you know, actually making progress to getting better.
This sounds really difficult, like more difficult than I think most people would ever imagine recovering from a concussion would be. I think most people would think that, don't want to say most people, let me just say what I would think. I haven't had a concussion, I don't think, since I was probably 20. Mm-hmm. And I would think that what it would be like would be like, oh, my head feels like shit. Let me just lie down here. I'll put ice on my head. I'll watch TV or something. And I'll take a lot of naps.
Right. Like you think it'll feel like a hangover or something.
Yeah.
The problem is that your thinking becomes muddled too. So it's not just that you have these physical symptoms. You're not able to think clearly. You're not thinking like yourself. And that can really lead to a lot of confusion, bad decisions. You know, people, they try to hide the severity of the symptoms because they think that it will, you know, other people will judge them, or they're like, there's a lot of that's very common. I've now learned with concussions, people hide the severity of symptoms because there's like, you're not thinking clearly, and you think it's important that other people not really see. But I've become this sort of weird spokesperson / guru for concussions because of my TED Talk about it. So every day, literally, I hear on Facebook or Twitter from someone who's like just been concussed, and they're like, "What do I do?" And I actually, I'm like, okay, I'm your ally, and I'm like always, you know, sending direct messages to like random people I don't know, checking in on them to see if they're doing the right thing, because it's not. Even like if your friends and family will not understand. They will think, oh, you'll be out on the couch for 3 days, and they expect you to be back to normal, and they don't understand why 3 months, 4 months later, you're still struggling. It's not, it has not been discussed enough, although I think that's changing now. People, especially with so many soldiers coming back with long-term symptoms of the concussions.
Now, the other thing that's confusing to me with this is that in the beginning, the first stage of your concussion, it's critical you do nothing.
Right.
But then after a while, you're like pushing it. Like, how much time can I spend in Whole Foods before I freak out?
Right. Yeah.
Like, many people would think that that's sort of counterintuitive.
Yeah. Well, in the beginning is when the brain needs the most resources, right? So you don't want
very early stages, like how many days?
So depending on the studies you read, it'll say between 48 hours to 1 week is the most crucial stage where you want the most cognitive rest, and you want to avoid basically just exhausting the brain, because anything you do that's cognitively demanding, it directs blood flow to different regions of the brain. You don't want your brain spending time trying to figure out your email instead of, because there's only so much blood to flow around, and you don't want it to be spent. And trying to do an email will require so much more effort from you than it normally would. So it's a sort of like vicious cycle. Now, eventually, the brain kind of gets into this sort of, I don't know, stasis where it's like, okay, now we're working, or you've got kind of your thickened up lesions that's going to take 4 months to kind of dissolve and be back to normal. So you can test and you can stay engaged, and not being engaged will fuel depression and anxiety. So partly it's like you're trying to balance the mental health with the cognitive health. I mean, you can't, if you were to do cognitive rest for a month, it would be like being in solitary confinement. And we know that that has really bad mental health effects.
Right. So you're kind of figuring this out as you go along. There's really not a road map that's set out. No one's ever done this before. And you just sort of take your game designing skills and apply what you know about the positive effects of games. Mm-hmm. And you experiment on yourself like a guinea pig.
Yeah, I was.
Were you worried at all that you might be fucking your brain up? Or not?
I'm like, what could be worse than what was already happening? And I mean, like literally within 48 hours, that fog, that like super black, you want to die fog was gone. And none of the symptoms didn't go away. I mean, I was as concussed as I was, but that feeling of hopelessness really went away. And
because of the fun of the game?
But so this is why I wrote the book, because I didn't really understand why it worked. I knew it worked for me, and then I put the rules online, and people started writing me from all over the world that they were using it, and not just for concussions. I mean, people were writing for, I have cancer, I just had knee surgery, someone, who was just diagnosed with ALS starts playing it, and it seemed to be extraordinarily effective at treating depression and anxiety, and also making people feel just stronger, just like better versions of themselves. And I did not understand it. And I say this all the time to people because there can be a lot of skepticism that a game can be helpful during a really serious challenge in your life. It sounds like trivial, it sounds stupid. So I freely acknowledge I didn't understand why it worked. It seemed kind of absurd to me for people with much more serious problems than I had too. So that's why I wrote the book. It's why I started doing, our clinical trial and the studies we've been doing for the last few years to try to understand, because I didn't, all I knew was that it seemed to be having all these positive effects, and even to a game designer like myself who believes in the power of games, I was really taken off guard.
So how did you structure it? Like, did you first start off just coming up with things like power pills or walnuts and bad guys or depression? And how did you put this whole thing together? Yeah,
I mean, I just started making YouTube videos, which is really funny. You can go back and look at the first YouTube videos of me. It's I think it's called why I'm making a game for my concussion or something like that. And
the first YouTube video you made, were you still suffering?
Oh, yeah.
Like, how many months was it into?
This is I think on day 34. This is the day I'm making a game. I'm going to make a YouTube video explaining the game.
What's it like to you when you watch that video now?
Oh, it's crazy because you can see I can't think of words. I think
Can we play it?
Yeah.
What is it? What would it be under? How would you find it?
Why I'm making a game, concussion, something like that.
Jamie will find it.
Yeah. Because it's you can see I can't. I mean, you see how fast I talk. I'm
right.
I'm talking really slow.
And how long ago was this?
5 years ago. Yeah.
And how long do you think it was before you felt like 100% you again?
I mean, so I'm 99%
right now?
Maybe. Yeah. I mean,
you're still not 100%?
No, there's still some things certain lights I can't be around.
Whoa.
It creates this, it feels like I'm having
5 years later.
Yeah.
Well, let's play this real quick.
Oh, there I am.
I am making this video to explain a new project.
Crank some volume, Jamie.
The project is a game to help me with the recovery process that I'm dealing with after I hit my head and got a concussion. And that was about 5 weeks ago. And the recovery has been very slow and hard. So it's getting to the point where I feel like I need a game to help me get through it. I was doing some research today about post-concussion syndrome, which is what I definitely
What's all that weird
have.
artifacts
That's
in
where
the
you
sound?
have trouble concentrating, trouble.
Oh, I mean, I'm probably just sitting there with my
doing
laptop
any
in my
kind
lap.
of, serious planning, mental problem solving.
That would give me a
In
concussion.
particular, I'm having a very hard time
I was
writing.
not a pro.
I'm also reading, and I get dizzy a lot. I get headaches and nauseous, that kind of thing.
Well, you could really see clearly you're moving way slower. You're
Yeah.
talking way slower. You could see you're struggling there.
Yeah.
Unless you're on meth right now. You're not on meth, right?
No. I am a naturally very energetic person.
It's fascinating to me that you're not 100% still.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm not sure entirely why. I was knocked out once when I was younger, like knocked out for like 5 minutes.
What happened?
I fell off a sliding board.
What's a sliding board?
I feel like a Philadelphia thing. I don't know. Like a slide, like at the playgrounds that you go down a slide. I think in Philly we called it sliding boards. And I fell right off the side and hit my head on a cement block.
Oh.
Yeah, I was really young. That was my first concussion.
So that's probably what's going on too, is a repeated concussion.
Right. No, what's interesting is I was so young. I was like, I don't know if it was like 4 or something. I actually didn't know that I'd had a concussion. I thought this was my first concussion in 2009. And the doctor's like, oh, have you had a concussion before? No. Because obviously everyone knows now if you have more than one, it can the healing will take longer. I didn't know until like a month into my injury, I'm talking to my parents and they mentioned, well, the last time you had a concussion, you were feeling better much faster. And I'm like, what? What last time? Oh, you remember when you fell off the sliding board when you were,
Who remembers
4.
anything when they're 4?
I know.
My 5-year-old doesn't remember anything when she was 4.
No, I mean, like, when you broke your collarbone. I'm like, oh, I do remember like wearing a sling for the collarbone, but I didn't know that I had a concussion.
Yeah. So even though you were 4 and then the next one you were an adult, it's still
maybe.
Still counts.
I mean, people like science does not quite understand how this works yet. Like if the cumulative knocks have to be all within the same few years or if it can stretch out over a lifetime. I try not to think about it too much because I'm like, God, if it happens again, then I'm really, but I like walk around like this sometimes.
Covering your head?
Yeah, like if I'm like at a, like a concert or like in a club.
Do you want to
or
wear
something.
a helmet if you go to a concert?
I literally, if I'm like at a nightclub or something, I want to wear a helmet. I'm like wondering if I can bring that back.
I used to date a girl that used to go to mosh pits. She was crazy, and she got headbutted by a dude once. She came over to my apartment after she had been moshing, and she was like holding her head. And I'm like, what are you doing?
Oh.
I think she went to see some crazy fucking band. I'm trying to remember is there a band called The Creeps?
Yeah.
It was? Yeah, this was in Boston in like 88, 89.
So we should be wearing helmets.
You definitely don't get headbutted in a mosh pit, yeah. But I would think like there's certain assholes, like drunken dummies, when you go out to places, you know.
No, and I'm short, so I'm always worried about the elbows. Like
if someone's like reaching for something.
Yeah, like some big dude will just. I mean, even like on planes when people are taking down their luggage.
Oh yeah.
I like cower by the windows. Cower by the window seat.
Smart.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the recognition of vulnerability is an issue with people that get hurt, because then all of a sudden you realize you can get hurt, and sometimes you just walk on eggshells all the time, and it reduces the quality of your life.
Yes, exactly. And that's sort of, that gets to that idea of, spotting the bad guys, things that could hurt you, and then you decide kind of how comfortable you are. You can't just run away. You can't just hide. You have to kind of push your comfort limits a little bit. But I'm not going to go skiing. I'm done
You just
with
don't
that.
ski?
Not going to ski, yeah.
Wow.
I did there's certain things now that I feel like it's not worth the risk to me a third,
I can only imagine. I just started skiing at 45. It's my first time skiing. I fucking wiped out hard last year. But that's fine. Didn't hit my head.
Good.
And I'm pretty good at falling. I know how to fall.
Yeah.
So I tumbled and rolled with it, but I was like, dude, I was going fast when I wiped.
Oh, yeah.
There's a video that's online today that I just retweeted earlier today. This fucking kid is in Colorado, and he's on a skateboard, and he's going 70 miles an hour down a hill. And you just watch it, and
Wow.
like every part of my body's like tingling with fear. You know, that anticipation of an injury is just like, ugh.
You tweeted that. Didn't you tweet the rooftopper, like the guy in Russia who goes hangs off? So that's, you know, I'm really interested in like neurohacks, how you can do little things to like, you know, change like how your brain is working right now. And that video, it seemed to me, would be really good for people to get a little bit of adrenaline going. If you're like on your couch and you're like having a hard time getting yourself out of bed.
Kid.
Oh my God.
He's going 70 miles an hour down this crazy hill with horrible music playing.
I mean, it looks like a video game, right?
I mean, it's just crazy that this kid is doing this because you can't stop. I mean, actually, he's really good.
Yeah.
So there's a point where he turns the skateboard sideways to slow it down, like at the very end. And there's a couple little wiggles there where it looks like he's about to go down. And if he goes down, dude, you're breaking everything.
Oh, yeah.
You're going 70 miles an hour. I mean, he is flying. I mean, there's no way. I mean, they're not faking this. Unless this is some sort of advanced CGI.
No, I was going to say, I mean, it almost could be a video game.
Like, watch when he reaches his hands down. He has some kind of crazy gloves on. And when he reaches his hands down, there's certain parts in the video where he's touching the sparks. Look at the sparks. See the sparks? Look at that. Jesus fucking Christ, that guy. He almost fell. I mean, he's getting, like, really close to falling. Like, there's a couple times there where there's, like, this intense wiggle. And he's tucking himself like a speed skater so that he can go faster. Right? Crazy fucker. Like, what is wrong with kids? I mean, I get it. This is an adrenaline rush. But when you see this, knowing what you suffered from standing up under a cabinet.
Well, yeah.
I mean, does this freak you out? Does he have a helmet on? Is that a hat? It's a helmet?
I hope it's a helmet. Holy moly.
Yeah, I mean, what is that helmet going to do?
Well.
A little. I get, like, look at this.
Man.
Look at that. That kid is crazy. That's how he slowed down. So now he's down to a reasonable pace. But when you see him, he'll do it again to slow it down. He grabs the board, and look at this. That is nuts.
But you figure how many hours of, I mean, because he's like a virtuoso at this.
Yes,
so there's like thousands and thousands of hours.
Yeah, he's put the 10,000 hours in.
Yeah. Exactly.
But good Lord. When you see something like that, knowing what you went through, like anything, like when you see like dirt bike riders doing flips.
I actually have I stopped watching professional football after I used to, go 49ers.
Right.
But I can't watch football anymore. Like I can, but I don't enjoy it in the same way because I feel bad for the players. And when I see like a really hard hit, I just feel bad. So
I think that's something that a lot of people are struggling with these days with all these, the Real Sports story that they did on traumatic brain injury and the issues that people are having, and all the stuff that I've seen from fighters over the years has definitely affected my enjoyment. What's this? Retiring after concussion. Next hit to my head could possibly kill me.
I mean, this is a thing now,
23.
right? People are, they're retiring 1-2 years into their career.
Yeah, well, there's more of that now than ever before because guys are realizing, first of all, at the end of their career, they're most likely going to be debilitated.
Yep.
I mean, almost all of the players that take a lot of hits suffer from serious injuries for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
And so when you're young and you're looking at your future, you're going, look, I could put all my energy into this and, be a mess, or I could say, you know what, I'm still young, I'm 23, I could do anything I want. Like, look, I've been in the NFL, I've experienced it. Let me just get the fuck out of here. Let's go try something else.
It makes you worry that the future of the sport there's going to be a big socioeconomic divide where the only people who really want to play and are willing to take that risk are people who feel like they have nothing to lose,
There's that, and there's the people that want to watch it. Like we've experienced that with the UFC too. There's a bunch of people that want to watch the head injuries. They don't know what they're seeing yet. They don't understand. Like when you watch somebody get KO'd like really badly, when you see someone get head kicked or dropped on their head or something like that, you just see excitement. You see like, oh, that guy just beat that guy.
Yeah. No, I know, and it's yeah, I can't watch fights either for the same reason. And I have friends who are so into it, and you just because I mean, so right, I love games. I understand a good game, a good sport is a good game, and you admire people's ability to be so good at this, this thing that we've created to test human potential. Right. But it's if I've sort of drifting to sports where there's fewer concussions, although like I'm a big tennis fan, and one of the big stars just got a concussion this weekend at the U.S. Open.
How?
So she slipped in the locker room after doing like the ice bath after like a really tough match. And it's interesting, they showed her coming to the court to see if she could practice with her sunglasses on and the hoodie pulled up, and she just has that look that like now I saw her, I was like, oh my God. I mean, she's like right in that zone of where she thinks she's going to play because she's not thinking clearly, but you can see her. I mean, she's like the shell of herself.
So when you see something like that, do you want to reach out to her?
Oh, yeah. No, I know. And people have been tweeting at her, too. Be like, you have to get SUPERBETTER. They just finished their clinical trial.
She's like, what the fuck are you talking about?
I know.
I'll be better, but what is SUPERBETTER?
Yeah. I know. I do. I do want to reach out because I know how hard it was and how so few people, I mean, it's just the general public conversation about this has not caught up to kind of the reality of what people experience.
Well, those ice baths, that's one of the problems with that form of cold therapy is that you get out and your legs are like rubber.
Yes.
Everything's not working so good. That's why you can't do that stuff and then work out.
Right.
Like there's some forms of cold therapy that you can do and you can work out after it, but not those ice baths.
I know. I have done, I run marathons, so I have done some ice bath, and Have
you ever done the whole body cryotherapy where you step in the chamber and you go to 250 degrees below zero for 3 minutes?
No.
It's awesome.
Is it really?
Oh, it's the best.
Is there like a mind-body element? Like, is there like a mental state that is changed?
Oh, yeah. Well, your brain produces something called neopinephrine.
Oh, yeah.
And cold shock proteins and all these different things happen when you hit minus 150 degrees below zero. Yeah. There's also something that someone just invented. One of the reasons I brought this up, something called a cryo helmet. Like you put it on over your head. It's like a gel pack thing. It's almost like a hoodie. And you put it on, and it's like they really recommend it for people that have had head injuries.
That's really interesting. I have
massive reduction in swelling.
Right. I could see that if you're trying to treat the inflammation.
Yeah, because it's like a whole thing, like a frozen helmet. You know, like those little gel packs.
No, yeah,
it's like one of those, but it's a helmet. Like you put it on your head.
I don't know. You might. Of course, I'm going to start doing.
Right there. That's it.
Yeah. No, you got to pull up like Google Scholar though. For me, I want to see like, is there any literature on this yet? Because I'm like.
Don't pull it up.
Don't pull it up.
Yeah,
I'm fairly conservative
Right.
with telling other people what to do.
Right.
Like for myself, I was like, oh, I'll make a game. But for telling other people what to do, I'm like, wait till there's a peer-reviewed paper.
For sure. But fighters, Bas Rutten, who's a former UFC heavyweight champion, great fighter, was talking about that. It's important, like when guys get hit, to ice their head after it's over. And in his rationale was like, look, if you hurt your knee, what's the first thing they do? They put ice on it. Why don't they put ice on your head?
Yeah.
And I was like, that actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I know. That's really interesting. I was just reading about, you probably know this. They say like 5 minutes after you stop breathing, supposedly you have like brain cell death. Have you heard, like if somebody's drowned and you can't get them breathing again in 5 minutes, then supposedly it's too late. And they're now finding that if you cool down the body and the brain, that they can come back. You can be not breathing, not, heart beating for more than 5 minutes now if you get the body temperature low enough.
Pack them with ice.
That's what they're doing now. They're starting to do that. It's like a first
Frankenstein
response.
shit.
I know. And I was just telling my husband, I'm like, we need to read this literature, because I want to know if I'm supposed to do this or wait till like the EMT shows up. Like if something happens, should I start packing ice or I'm not sure. I'm not actually sure of the practical implications of this.
Yeah, as you get older, you realize more and more how damn vulnerable people are.
Yes.
We're so physically vulnerable.
Yes. Well, this is really interesting because, in doing what I do, I have confronted a lot of skepticism. And I would even say, people who are really quite sarcastic, when they hear about this, oh, I'm going to adopt a secret identity and it's going to make me not depressed. You know, usually it's people not suffering from depression who say this. Because if you're really suffering from something debilitating like clinical depression, you will try anything. So it's people who are pretty happy and healthy, and they'll say, this sounds ridiculous. But
you're talking about bloggers, right?
Yes. Well, yeah. And the New Yorker just ran a big, like, giant piece about SUPERBETTER. Sort of, you know, it was both positive, but also like, still, this sounds kind of ridiculous.
Well, it does sound ridiculous.
Yeah. But then it's like,
it still can work and sound ridiculous.
Exactly. And that's why it's like, when you realize how vulnerable people are and how much is out of our control, I mean, those are the people who are the first in line to try this and who benefit the most. So we had 500,000 people play an electronic version, like logging their power-ups and their bad guys and quests, so that I could get data on it and see what are the most effective power-ups, like how often do you have to, you know, check in to get better. And we found that people with the most painful and difficult situations were the ones that were benefiting the most. It's like, sort of, the more you realize how vulnerable you are, the more open you are, and the more this kind of concrete, purposeful, positive action can actually make a big difference.
That makes sense. I mean, once you feel the vulnerability, it becomes real. Whereas when you look at someone who has a broken leg and you go, oh, I can intellectually understand that that person broke their leg, but I don't know what it feels like.
Right.
You know, if you've never broken your leg, you don't know that feeling. You're like, oh, fuck, I can't even stand on this stupid thing.
Right.
There's that feeling where, like, okay, now what do I have to do? What do I have to do? Tell me what I have to do. And then the reality changes.
Yeah.
And the reality of you having that head trauma and trying to figure out, like, there has got to be a way to get out of this swamp, this mental swamp that I'm stuck in. Let's fucking make a game. Like, let's do, like, you're just... I mean, it makes sense to me. A person who's been through a bunch of surgeries and injuries and stuff, it totally makes sense to me, because there's a reality that every time I've really badly injured myself, like where I needed knee surgery or something, there's like just an acceptance. Just go, let's just go do it. Let's go do it, because now this thing's broken.
Yep.
And until that happens, there's a bunch of people that tell you, well, why don't you try rehabbing it? Why don't you try doing this? Like, no, it's like, I don't think you get it.
No, and a lot of times you'll have an injury and you won't know if it will get better. If you'll be able to get back to what you were doing before, which is actually where the name SUPERBETTER comes from, because I wasn't sure I would ever have the same cognitive capabilities I had. And at that time I was I had just gotten my PhD. I was doing research. I was used to being able to have an intellectual profession. And so everyone's like, get better soon. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? That means get back to who you were before this happened. And I didn't know if I would ever be able to do any of that again. So I thought, well, I'm not going to get better. I'm going to get super better. I'll just be different. I'll be like this new super version of myself, like Spider-Man. He got bit by the radioactive spider, and this concussion is my radioactive spider, and I don't know who I'm going to be, but it'll be someone different. And instead of just trying to, because anytime you have an injury or an illness, you don't know who you're going to be at the end of it. It might be back to normal. It might be different. And you want it to be the best different that it could be. Yeah,
there's been many stories of people that have gotten knocked on the head and all of a sudden had musical talent or mathematical talent.
Yes.
Were you hoping that was going to...
I had the weirdest experience. So I'm a very introverted person by nature. Like, if my phone rings, I won't answer it. Like, even if you're my friend or like you're my mom, I'm like, oh, it's too much social interaction. Like, I get anxiety. I can't answer it. So that's been like my whole life. But what we know about, like, the difference between introverts and extroverts is introverts tend to stimulate themselves with internal thinking. They're always thinking, and they don't need other people to kind of get them excited. Extroverts respond much more positively to external stimulation. It's like they're just primed. If they see someone smiling at them, it's like a cocaine hit, So when I had the injury, I couldn't think to myself anymore. I couldn't, like, entertain myself with my own thoughts, and I became like this super extroverted person. And I started, like, calling everybody in my phone, like, contact list, which people I would never, I wouldn't even pick up the phone. And I'm like, please talk to me, because I couldn't I literally could not be an introvert anymore. But that only lasted for like a couple months. And then when I started to get better, I went back to being introverted. And I still, today, I try to keep some of that because I actually discovered, wait, I really, like, it's nice to talk to people. It's not actually a burden, you know. But that was one of the sort of super better, you know, changes for me, as I realized. And we know from psychological literature, extroverts really are happier, they live longer, they're psychologically healthier. It is, if you can convince yourself to be social, it's really good for you. But introverts just still have a different brain chemistry, so their brain's telling them, ugh, people scary, like, you know, too much stimulation. Yeah.
Well, that's one of the weirdest things about online interaction is that it's kind of a combination of both introvert behavior and extrovert behavior, because even though you are interacting with people, you're not seeing them.
No, it's controlled, and that's it's the face-to-face can be really
daunting.
Yeah, like just the energy
social
that it
cues.
takes. Yeah. I mean, it's not the same thing as being. I mean, just because you're an introvert doesn't mean you're, I don't know, like socially unable. Like you're not a misfit.
Well, obviously you're very capable of keeping a regular conversation going.
Yes.
I mean, you're not. I mean, you could say you're an introvert, but you're easy. You're like you're just talking, no problems. You're not.
Yeah.
I've had some introverts on this podcast before, and it's obvious. They're like, everything's an effort. You know?
Yeah. It's probably more of an effort for me than it looks. But I
think it's more of an effort for everybody than it looks.
Maybe. Well, that's a good point.
Yeah. I think that one of the issues with online interaction is that you don't see the people, and you don't, it's just like, my intention is, it's kind of ambiguous. Like you write something or you put something out there, and it's not completely clear. Like if you say something, I get the tone. I can tell if you're being sarcastic. And if you say something mean to me, like we have to look at each other. I'm like, fucking really? Like, and there's this weird thing to it.
Yeah.
Whereas if you do that online, there's like none of that.
Yeah.
And I think that there's something very strange that's going on in our culture right now with so many people spending a giant amount of their time only interacting with people through text.
Absolutely. Well, that's one of the areas of research that I was diving into. So, because I don't just research brain injury stuff. I typically research video games and how they change how we feel and think and act in
What did
the
you
rest
get your
of our lives.
PhD in?
The field is called performance studies. So I was just basically studying how people perform in video games and as a result of video games, sort of collaboration skills, their sort of psychological performance, things like that at UC Berkeley was where I studied. And so one of the things that we know that's happening in video games is that there's a really big difference between playing a video game in the same room with somebody and playing online. So like if we're playing Call of Duty and I'm trying to kill you, if we're playing in the same room, we actually undergo really great, they call it synchronization. So our heart rates will sync up, our breathing rates sync up. We get a kind of mirror neuroning process going on where it's like blood flow is mirroring where it's flowing. The patterns of activation are mirroring each other. And all of that's associated with more compassion, more empathy. We like each other more. We trust each other more. Even if the game is violent, even if we're competing, all of this happens. And it happens because, when you're playing a game with or against someone, you have to try to get in their brain. Like, what are they going to do next? What's their next move? And so your brain starts to mirror what you think they're doing. So it's this really intense mind-body mirroring that goes on.
What triggers the mirroring? The observance of the character on the screen?
Well, no, it's because it only works if you're in the same space, physical space with them.
But you're still looking at a screen.
Yeah, but you're trying to think, what are they doing? And there's just something about if you may think you're looking at the screen, but there's also just a general awareness. Like when you're sitting next to someone, you're aware of sort of what's going on and cues that you're picking up, body language cues. And if you like turn to look at them, you'll even just in a split second, you'll get this sort of facial expression cue. And that doesn't happen in online games. So what we've...
And it's been measured?
Oh, yeah. So what we've seen is if you take the same game and play it, against somebody in the room, you wind up with these positive impacts, like, more compassion, more empathy, you like each other more. If you play the same game online, you're not able to see their facial expression, you're not able to get the same syncing phenomenon. You actually dehumanize the opponent. Your testosterone goes up, you feel less empathy towards them. And so it's one of the reasons why in the book I talk about how, unless you're actively trying to change your personality to be more aggressive and you want to, I don't know, for some reason you feel like you want to be kind of more of have this like aggressive, hostile personality, you should not spend more than half your time trying to beat strangers online because it's just not.
Half your time is a lot of time.
Half your gaming time.
Oh, okay. Jesus Christ. What are you recommending? It's 24 hours in a day. You should never spend more than 12 hours killing strangers online.
And actually it's 21 hours a week is where you start to see the benefits of games reduce and negative impacts increase. So there's another public service announcement.
What if have you done it in layers where, you like, I used to do LAN parties with my friends. We used to play Quake LAN parties. And it's really fun. There's a lot of camaraderie and stuff.
Yeah.
But if you put a barrier up, but they're in the same room, or if they're in a room that's right next door, but they're there and maybe you can hear their voice, or if you shut that door and you can't hear their voice, have they seen like what if the mirroring is consistent?
Yeah. The studies that I've seen show that you have to be in physical proximity. So if there was a barrier and I was unable to look over and get those cues from your body language or from your facial expression, that it would not happen.
What if it was like a cubicle thing and I could just like reach up?
Yeah. Then you probably would. And I like this idea of the staging. The thing I'm really curious about is with Twitch and now YouTube gaming, is if you can watch somebody playing and now you're seeing their face while they're playing a game. Studies have shown that watching someone play a game that you know how to play will trigger the same mirror neurons because your brain can kind of emulate. If you're playing a game I don't know how to play, I don't know the controls, I don't know the goals, my brain will just be like, I don't know. But if I know how to play the game, I'm like, oh, I know what she's trying to do.
Like
I know what her strategy is.
Something like that,
whatever it is.
Where everybody knows what to do. Get away from the ghosts.
Yeah. So one thing I'm interested in is if I can see someone's face, while they're playing the game, they're playing a game I know, could you get some of the benefits? But it would only be unidirectional because if you're like live streaming your gameplay, you can't see me.
Of course.
So, but it would be interesting because we know that if you get this mirror neuron effect, it makes people want to help each other more, like each other more. I'm like thinking like being a powerful, Twitch streamer or YouTube game streamer, like could make you really cultivate a large community of people who really want to help you. It seems like if I were building an empire of like a new kind of community, I feel like that would be what I would be building because they would be really, it would be like a really tight bond,
That's fascinating. This Twitch thing has caught a lot of people by surprise.
Yeah.
Because I think no one would have ever thought that it would be so popular to watch someone play video games.
Right. And the mirror neuron thing helps explain it because it's not like watching TV where it's just passive. If you know how to play the game, your brain starts working to sort of process it and anticipate, what they're going to do next, and trying to figure out what decision they'll make or where they'll go. And so you're actually getting a lot of the same stimulation as if you were playing the game yourself. And that's the thing people don't understand. We see this with musicians too. If you know how to play a musical instrument and you watch somebody playing that same musical instrument, your brain starts to, activate as if you were playing it yourself, which is why it can be more interesting for someone who knows how to play the piano to watch someone else play the piano or listen to someone else play the piano versus somebody who doesn't know.
It totally makes sense. When I used to play Quake, we used to watch these things. They call them demos, and what it was a game that they would record, and so you'd see it through a player's eyes, so you get to see how good a player moves, and then it would make you play better. You would play better after you saw that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they were really popular. Like demos were super popular. You would download them and you would play them in game, like in your game.
Yeah, I remember remember that.
Yeah. Do you remember that?
I
Yeah.
do. I was like into Counter-Strike a little bit.
Well, that's the case with athletics too. A lot of people tell me that when they watch like a really good basketball player play, that it makes them play better basketball.
Yep.
I know it's the case with pool. I play pool, and when I watch really good players play, like I can kind of emulate what they do. But if I feel like it's not just like copying, but I kind of tune in.
Oh yeah,
because
your brain is practicing it. I find that after a grand slam in tennis, because I'll watch. I mean, the only reason why I'm not watching tennis right now is because we're here doing this.
Is there something going on?
Oh yeah, the U.S. Open. My favorite player is playing like literally right now.
Who's your favorite player?
Joe Willie Songa, who I named my puppy after. I have a dog named Songa, and he's playing right now to get to the semis. But no spoilers because I'm recording it. But I know that, so I'll go like 2 weeks watching hours and hours of tennis a day. Then I go to play tennis, and I'm better. I'm absolutely I see the ball better. I get to it better. I mean,
totally
absolutely,
makes sense.
because my brain has spent 2 weeks mirroring everything I see. But if you don't know how to play, if you've never played, your body won't do it. So you have to have a model for this to work.
Totally makes sense. Yeah, because like something like tennis, like I've maybe played once in my whole life when I was in my early 20s.
Yeah, so you wouldn't get as much benefit.
No, I wouldn't get anything because I'm not going to play again, I don't think. I've just not enough time in the day. But I totally understand that. That totally makes sense. I think that probably is the case with pretty much everything that people do. It's one of the reasons why a sense of community amongst people that are all involved in the same sort of endeavor is so important, because you kind of push each other and inspire each other. And also you kind of feed off of each other. Maybe like if we were all comedians, maybe you would have like a certain kind of style that I don't have, and I would see your style and go, oh, Jane's got this crazy thing she's doing. Oh, that's kind of cool. And then like maybe I would do something that you didn't do, and you're like, maybe I need to like be more this or be more, and sort of tune into how people are doing, to the point where a lot of comics, when they're around each other, it becomes an issue sometimes because they kind of mimic each other's personas, or
even just the cadence. You would think you'd start picking up.
Well, there's a guy named David Tell. He's like one of the funniest guys ever, and he's got a way of talking that's really fun. And when he talks, like there's so many young guys that come up that start talking like David Tell, and it's like it became an issue where there was like all these little, like Patrice O'Neal used to call them Attell babies. There was all these Attell babies that were running around it, but really they're just young comics that admire his sort of and they're trying to do it too, and they're like super inspired because they're young and they're just trying to make it, and then they're seeing this guy who's just, you know, like fantastic comedian, like God, and then they don't even realize it, but they're just adopting it. Yeah,
no, that makes perfect sense. I mean, you just it becomes a template.
Yeah, nobody exists in a vacuum, right? I mean, everybody sort of, everyone influences everyone around them to a certain extent. We all want to believe that we're some rogue independent operator that exists out in the fringe of society and lives in a fucking wooden house in the woods somewhere.
That sounds nice.
Yeah, it sounds nice, but it's a creation of fiction.
Oh yeah, no, and it's funny. Someone I admire, Clive Thompson. He writes a lot about technology for like Wired and New York Times, and he had a book out recently about, you know, is technology changing our brain? And the opening chapter says, you know, newsflash, everything changes your brain. This sentence you just read, it changed your brain.
Right.
So, I mean, on one hand, it's sort of silly to look at research that says, oh, games change your brain like this, or, you know, music changes your brain like that, because everything you do, everything you're exposed to, changes your brain. You're making a memory, or you're sort of activating a pattern. So, I mean, like even this conversation, you know, like,
yes,
congratulations, like you have changed my brain today.
Yes.
But this is just something to think about. Like
that's
it's a lot of responsibility in how we interact with each other.
It is. And well, that's one of the weirdest things about doing a podcast is how many people will tell me after they listen to the podcast for 500 episodes, dude, you changed my life.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's a lot of responsibility. But we really are changing each other's lives. I mean, the podcast has changed my life, just being able to talk to all these different people. That's why it's important not to have dipshits in your life. Because if you're around people that are just constantly fucking up and constantly making the same mistakes over and over again, like that pattern affects you too.
Yes.
Like that pattern will creep into your mind.
Yes. Well, they say, you know, it's it's really good to surround yourself with people who inspire you, because they talk about having a cognitive model for behavior change. Like if you're trying to get better in some way, if you know somebody who's already done it or doing positive things in their lives, it requires less energy for your brain to imagine yourself doing it. Like if you're not surrounded by anybody who's trying to get healthier or trying to get fit or whatever it is, it's literally harder to imagine. And so it's like more exhausting for you to try to imagine yourself getting better. Whereas if you're surrounded by people who are doing it, it becomes familiar to your brain. There's all sorts of examples that your brain can call on. It literally takes less energy for you to imagine yourself actually doing it. And weirdly, they found at Stanford University, using like avatars, if you can see an avatar that is designed to look like you, like doing the sort of things you want to do, like, being really physically fit, like working out in the game world, if you just watch an avatar custom designed to look like you doing that, it lowers the cognitive threshold for you to do it, and then you will do more in real life. You will work out more. You'll spend more time committed to those goals just by having watched the sort of mirror version of yourself having done it.
That's fascinating. That's fascinating, because that seems to open up a whole new realm of possibility for people creating virtual realities.
Yeah.
Like virtual realities where one of the big things that they say it's important for progress in sports and in pretty much anything is visualization. Mm-hmm. Visualize yourself doing things. It's a big thing with martial arts. They take a lot of fighters. They talk them through their scenarios. They will sit down and they'll close their eyes and meditate and visualize themselves getting out of bad situations, visualize themselves winning, and do it over and over and over again to the point where it becomes like a part of, this is your reality. Your reality is you win.
Yeah.
It seems like if you could watch a video of you doing all those things, an artificially created you.
Yep. Absolutely.
Like jumping higher than you've ever jumped before, scoring in tennis or playing.
And there's a little bit of nuance to it that's really interesting. So, for example, if you are like walking on a treadmill while you're watching a custom avatar of yourself, and the avatar starts running faster and is getting fitter, you will run faster. You will work harder. If you are engaged in an activity, it can really get you moving. So it's like it would be good to tie it to when you're actually working out. Like it might not last for I watched this movie today, and a week later I'm still feeling more powerful. You kind of want to do it in the moment. The one study at Stanford found for 24 hours they sort of were more physically active, like taking stairs or doing more push-ups or whatever. But I do like the idea of using it purposely like that. The one thing they know is, like, for positive visualization, I don't know if you've seen, there's been new research coming out that you have to visualize the effortful action and not the outcome. Like if you're visualizing getting, lifted up on people's shoulders, like I'm the champion, that actually seems to sometimes have a counterproductive effect, because your brain can imagine it so vividly, you kind of feel like you've already had that payoff, and you put in less effort. There's been studies for a few years that show this. But if you're visualizing the effortful activity that it takes to get there, you're picturing, here's what I have to do on game day. And you're thinking about the things that require effort on your part, techniques or, the actions you're going to take. That is helpful. So you just don't want to think about, I can't wait till they, call me up and say that I won, whatever. You can't think about you have to be visualizing the things that are going to require effort and energy on your part. That seems to be the most helpful.
It's so fascinating because just that statement right there, that seems to be the most helpful. There's so much weirdness in all this. There's so much. It's like magic. Like what the fuck is going on? Like with the visualization process, what's the mechanism? Like what is it? Inspiration? I mean, how much is inspiration a factor in success? I would say probably gigantic, right? Well, so is that all it is?
I mean, there's so many different avenues. I focus on self-efficacy as what you're trying to increase, as opposed to inspiration. So self-efficacy is when you feel like you have the skills and abilities and resources you need to achieve your goal. And it's different from self-esteem. Self-esteem's like, oh, I'm a good person. I sort of like myself. Self-efficacy is very specific. Like if I have self-efficacy about running a marathon, it means that I have done, at least a few 20-mile runs. I know how hard it's going to be. I've got my resource. I know how to, fuel during the run. I know how much sodium I have to take at different points. I know what the course looks like, so I've got a mental plan. Having that sense of reasonable optimism and focusing on visualizing what you'll do successfully that's focused on your own skills and abilities, that in all of the scientific literature is linked to better outcomes. Whereas if you're imagining things that are outside of your control, it just doesn't, because it might inspire you and maybe you'll, get out of bed and put more of an effort as you, picture something good happening to you. But the mental model that seems to be most powerful is when you're focusing on things that you have direct control over, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Self-efficacy. How much of all that is just a little like what we're talking about is just focus, is just thinking about what you're doing, and the more you think about what you're doing and the more energy you put towards what you're doing makes you better. And how much of this is just, is it possible that all these ideas of just visualization is what you're doing is really just focusing more and loving more what you're doing?
I think that could be a big part of it. The focused attention, you're able to perform better, you learn faster. I think part of it is also something to do with the dopamine system. In video games, so I've talked to lots of neuroscientists for this book, and a lot of them will say if you want to increase someone's self-efficacy, you have them play a video game, because in a video game, you're constantly required to take action and then wait to see, I try to fire my weapon. I wait to see if I shot successfully. I try to orient around an obstacle. I'm going to get information. Every time that your brain expects information about your performance, it gives you a little dopamine release. And dopamine feels good, so you get excited. But increased dopamine also allows you to pay closer attention and to learn faster, right? So anytime you're trying something where you're constantly taking actions, getting feedback, and you have to kind of learn and improve, you'll get all this dopamine going, and that is associated with the ability to build self-efficacy. So I think that there's a neurochemical process that's underlying this. It's not just a matter of what you think. It's also about changing what is going on in your brain so that the brain is primed to learn faster, to improve. And that's why there seem to be so many cool applications for video games, because if you can get a cancer patient who feels really powerless and overwhelmed to play a video game about chemotherapy, and it starts building self-efficacy and getting all the dopamine going. There was a clinical trial that showed that kids who played a video game about cancer were, for 2 to 3 months later, missing fewer doses of their medicine, taking more antibiotics. They were more engaged, which leads to more cases of cancer going into remission.
Right, but isn't that just more focus? It's just focusing and thinking. It's using it as a mechanism to focus and think about your illness, focus and think about your recovery.
But it's focus with the dopamine hit, and the increased dopamine is gonna it changes. So now we'll get really deep here. Every time that you consider a goal, your brain stops and says, "Is it worth it?" Because your brain's trying to conserve your body's energy and your cognitive energy, and will say, "If I do this goal, do I really want it? Am I going to put the energy to do it?" And what researchers have found is the more dopamine you have in your reward pathways, the more you focus on the positive outcome and the less you think about the effort required. So if I give you a bunch of dopamine hits, you're going to be thinking about, I might be cured someday. I don't care how many side effects there are to this medicine. I'm swallowing this pill, and I'm going to do it because you're focused on the positive outcome, not all of the other things that stress you out about it or make you, the nausea and the energy that it takes. And this is true if you're doing push-ups, you know, like, do I really feel like doing 100 push-ups right now? If you have more dopamine going, you're going to be more likely to say, this is important to me, it's important to my training. And if you are low dopamine, which is when you're clinically depressed, you have really low dopamine. So everything seems too hard. Oh, why am I going to bother getting out of bed? There's like, the effort required seems so much more important than the goal. So there is a neurological underpinning to self-efficacy, is sort of this combination of really wanting to achieve your goal and having that increased attention so you learn faster. So but you have to, it's not just a matter of saying, I'm going to pay attention now. You have to be priming your brain to increase the dopamine in your reward pathways.
Right, but the dopamine hit, what is the mechanism that creates the dopamine hit? Is it just simply loving what you're doing and being enthusiastic about it? No. Is it goals?
It's goals. It's anticipation. Well, specifically, it's anticipation of feedback. So the fastest way, like you wanted to increase your dopamine right now, I would say make a prediction about something that's going to happen today. It could be anything. Like I predict that Sango will win today in 4 sets. Whatever it is, you make a prediction about something. Every time you make a prediction, your brain's like, oh, I might be right. I'm going to, and that'll feel good. And if I'm not right, I'll learn something. Why did he lose in 5 sets or whatever? So I make a better prediction next time. That gives you a dopamine. So in a video game, when you fire your weapon, you have predicted that it's going to successfully shoot that guy over there. And you're waiting to see on the screen, did I miss or did I hit? That's why you get a dopamine hit. So every time you make a prediction, your brain gears up to either celebrate that you were right, yay, success, or I got to learn so that I can do better the next time. That's
why I think I have friends. I have one friend in particular that didn't grow up with any healthy sense of competition, and he's actually talked about that. Like, if there's one thing that he could go back and do again, like he thinks his parents didn't really instill any sense of competition in him, and he's one of those guys, if he's playing a game and it's not going his way, he'll pull the plug.
Ooh.
He'll flip the board over. He's that guy.
Ah.
Yeah, right. Well, you know what's going on in the brain, so
Yeah.
you have this reaction. But to him, losing is just devastating, and
Right.
games are only if you can win.
Right. Well, and it's probably what's going on is his brain is saying, you know, it's starting to realize no amount of effort is going to turn this around. And so he just walks away.
Well, not only that, there's no history of figuring things out and getting better.
Right.
Like, everybody who's ever started anything and gotten really good at it knows that in the beginning you suck.
Yes.
And it's kind of exciting.
Yeah.
Like, you pick something up, say tennis, you know? Like, if I started playing tennis today, I don't know how to play tennis. I would suck. And it would be exciting because I would get my ass kicked and I'd be like, okay, I have to figure this fucking thing out.
Absolutely.
Like, what makes that ball spin like that? How's that guy whack that ball? Oh, I see. He knows. He's number crunching. He's like data. He knows. He's chunking information. He knows that if I move left, the ball's going to go there and he's going to go here. And okay.
Yeah.
And I don't have that. So,
and that experience of getting better, I mean, that's the basis for self-efficacy. So it's like, sometimes people ask me, like parents will say, what games should my kids be playing for a learning experience? But I say every game is designed to be a learning experience because you're supposed to be bad. And that's why games feel so good, is that you're every time you play a new game, you're figuring it out, you're learning how it works, you're getting better. That experience of constantly getting better and proving to yourself, oh, I can figure something out, I can improve, I can master something. That's one of the reasons. This is a fundamental reason why people like playing games and why they don't play the same game forever. I mean, sometimes you do, if the game that you can never master, like chess or something, you know. But most people will really get into a game for a while and then feel like they have stopped improving. And so the brain gets, wants to keep learning, wants to keep getting better. The dopamine hits are only going to come if you aren't sure how to be successful, right? So you have to play a new game. That's why we don't play tic-tac-toe as adults, right? No dopamine hits with tic-tac-toe because you know exactly what's going to happen every move.
Bullshit game. I keep trying to tell my 5-year-old. It's gonna be a draw every time, kid. This is bullshit. there's like elitism attached to chess, where chess is the only game that's considered a worthwhile pursuit.
I know, it's terrible.
What is that? Because parents will tell kids that are playing video games that they're wasting their time.
I know.
But if you came home and your kid was playing chess silently with his friend, and they're just looking at you'd be like, oh, my kid is up to a good thing.
Oh, sure. I mean, first, because Einstein played chess, so
Is that what it is?
Well, I think that's part of it. Although, it's really interesting. If you read letters that he used to write,
Fucking hated chess.
No, he loved chess. But he wrote to people that he was worried that he was addicted to it. He talked a lot about how he had this game addiction, which is fascinating when you think about today, how many people worried about, I'm addicted to World of Warcraft or whatever game. So even Einstein worried about being addicted to his favorite game.
It is real. Game addiction is absolutely real,
It
right?
is. It is real. It is absolutely real. And there are techniques for breaking that pattern. By the way, if you would, do you want a quick technique for how to break?
Sure.
Okay. There's a whole chapter in the SUPERBETTER book about game addiction and how to stop it, how to reverse it, and what tends to lead people into it. So the biggest...
I wish my friend Duncan was here right now. He's the biggest addict I know when it comes to video games. Yeah, it makes me feel normal.
The biggest predictor for who will become addicted to games and feel like it kind of gets out of control, spirals out of control, is if they're playing for escapist purposes to try to block other feelings. Like, I have all these problems, I'm going to play the game instead. Or I'm feeling anxious, I'm going to play the game instead. So the way you reverse it is you have to, I talk about it as playing to get better. You are, instead of playing to avoid something, you focus on what you're doing that is making you better. Even if it's just to start getting better at this game, then you focus on, I'm playing with, my friends, it's like improving my relationships, or I'm focusing on strategy or building my teamwork skills or whatever it is. You start to think about other goals outside the game that the game is connected to, because the biological process of addiction is the narrowing of goals that the brain responds to. This is true for drug addiction, all forms of addiction, pornography. Narrowing
of goals that the brain responds to.
Right. So, I said you get like this dopamine hit when you anticipate something good. In addiction, the brain starts to believe that the only source of the next dopamine hit is the thing you're addicted to. And you can't imagine other things that are going to make you feel that good or feel that excited. And there's this great new book called The Biology of Desire that a neuroscientist kind of lays out all the new thinking on addiction. And the way that you break, one of the ways you break out of cycle for any addiction is to start priming the brain to anticipate success or pleasure from other things. So you have to, they talk about like widening the scope of what is going to provide that dopamine hit. So in gameplay, you have to stop thinking about the game as the only source of that good feeling. So you have to start thinking about other goals that you have besides just the sort of sense of relief that the game is going to provide. So
that's something that they tell addicts, that are drug addicts, channel that addiction into something else. So that's essentially what they're saying. They're saying what you need to do is find something else, but that's positive that you can get addicted to.
Yes.
So you're seeking out that weird chemical reaction in the mind when you're stimulated by something else.
Right.
So instead of chasing crack, you'll chase exercise.
Yes. But what we're seeing with games is because games aren't inherently dangerous. You don't have to quit playing games. And in fact, it can be dangerous to just go cold turkey on games, because it's like taking someone off an antidepressant without tapering them, because games have such a powerful impact on our happiness.
You know how many kids are going to listen to this? Go, Mom, it's dangerous for me to quit this game.
Listen
to Jane.
There are like there are cases of kids who have killed themselves when their parents turn off the game.
Those kids would have killed themselves over anything.
I think it is likely related to, it's the same thing when you take someone off an antidepressant and the brain is no longer having that. It's like dopamine. You lose your ability to imagine. Is the term positive?
Is the term addiction, like, is that a flawed term? Like, because it seems like it's so limiting. And so narrow in its scope. We think of addiction, we think of, oh, he's on the heroin. Yeah. Like you just automatically think. But really, what is it that your brain has locked into these
That's right.
pathways of
Yep.
achieving desirable effects.
Absolutely. And there's a lot. I've done some work with some rehabilitation centers, recovery centers for addiction, where they're starting to be more aware of this, the new sense of what addiction is. But if people are interested, the book that just came out this year about that, The Biology of Desire, does a really good job of explaining it, because it's a pretty provocative argument. It says that addiction is not a disease. It's the brain is functioning absolutely perfectly. It's just focusing on, it's like hyper focusing on one goal. But if you had that same brain chemistry about running a startup company, I mean, Mark Zuckerberg was addicted to his startup in the same way that someone can get addicted to a video game or addicted to a substance. You get hyper focused on one goal. It's your only source of pleasure and anticipation of these positive feelings. So the brain is working properly. It's not broken. It's not a disease in that sense. It's that it's just gotten stuck.
It's got stuck on something
particular,
that's non-productive.
Yeah, that is maybe ultimately not good for you physically, or not good for the life that you're trying to lead.
Good for your career, or good for your family life. Or I had a buddy that was addicted to one of those role-playing games. I guess it was EverQuest. And he had this really profound statement. We were at the Comedy Store once. He was one of the managers. And he said, I am so good at making money in my online life and so bad at it in my real life.
Yeah.
And he was sitting there like a broken man. And I'm like, how often do you play? He's like, 8 hours, 9, 10 hours a day, every day. And I go, every day. And he goes, yeah, I can't not play it. And then that's when he said that. It was like this rare break from the game during his free time. He wasn't working, and he came down to the Comedy Store to hang out. And he was pasty white, pale, almost gray-skinned.
Yeah.
Because he was just drained, malnourished, sitting in front of a monitor all the time, clicking and moving and clicking.
Yeah. And so it's like the intervention for that, if you were to sort of follow the guidelines of how you get people to sort of focus on other goals, is you would just start by asking him, well, why are you good at making money in this game? What does it take in terms of skill or, commitment or resource? What are you doing? And start to think about strengths and abilities. And then when you are thinking about yourself and what you're good at and what you're capable of, it kind of takes you out of, you own it. It's not the game, right? The game isn't making you successful or happy. It's your own skills and abilities. And that seems to be, if you look at the scientific literature, just talking about what you own and what is a result of your skills and abilities, that helps you broaden that. So you realize you can apply that elsewhere. There might be other venues. It's not the game that's giving this to me. This is something that I own.
Right. That's so hard to intellectualize, though, when you're in the grips of addiction.
I know. It's why there's questions in my book that literally you can ask someone or you can ask yourself. So you don't have to intellectualize it. I mean, just do there are 100 quests in the book. You just do what I tell you to do. They're all designed like little game missions, because it is hard to change your mindset. I mean, it's definitely hard. But what we know from studies of all kinds of mindset interventions is that once you do it, it sticks. So unlike a lot of forms of therapy or medication, you have to take this pill for the rest of your life. You have to be in therapy for years. If you can do a mindset intervention, it's done. Benefits are there. It's locked in. And you can have a 5-minute mindset intervention and instead of taking, prescription for the rest of your life.
What I found to mitigate my addiction problems or my addictive tendencies is just do a bunch of different things.
Yep.
I have a bunch of different activities that I do, and the reason why I do them, so many different things, is to keep from locking on one.
Exactly. So you've intuitively figured that out already.
Well, I figured it out from trial and error over a long life of addiction. I grew up being addicted to a bunch of different things. At first it was art, and then it became martial arts, and then as I got older it became stand-up comedy, and it became pool. I had a real problem with pool to a point where my manager thought it was ruining my career.
Oh my gosh.
I was playing 8-10 hours a day. I was playing in tournaments. All I wanted to do was play pool. I would go do my comedy sets, and then I'd go play pool till 3-4 o'clock in the morning, And then I would get up in the morning, I'd go work out, I'd go, go do my comedy and do the same thing every night. But all I was thinking about was the game. I was thinking about knocking the balls into the hole, like the dopamine effect or whatever it is of winning, or of being successful, of running out the table, of having the ball do what you want it to do. Yeah. And because it's so difficult, the reward is so much, like anything that's really, like if you play a game, it's really easy. When you win, it doesn't mean anything. But when you play a game that's really hard to do, that reward is so fucking exciting.
Yeah. But this is interesting because, like, you become a more interesting person as a result of having all the things that you do. Like, you're like this really, I mean, it's like unusual that you have all of these things instead of, being hyper-focused on one aspect. So it's probably... I mean, it seems like a good strategy.
I'm just a broad spectrum junkie. That's it. It's just have a bunch of things that I'm a junkie to.
That could be like a recipe for a good life, though. I mean, this is kind of interested in that idea now. Like, what? Like that should be like a thing. Broad spectrum junkie.
I mean, it works right now, but it could go off the rails.
Yeah, well, you got to keep that circle wide.
Yeah, I've gone off the rails several times in my life.
But it's just like, even I, like with running, like I definitely use running for my mental health. And if I get an injury, that is really hard for me. I have to replace it with something, or else, you go into a depression.
It's a big thing with jiu-jitsu guys. It's very difficult for them to take the time off before they go back and train again once they get injured. Yeah. And I have a couple chronic injuries that I have because... One particular, a back injury that was a bulging disc that I would ignore. Right. I would hurt it pretty bad, and then 2 weeks later I'd be sparring again. Yeah. Because I just needed that rush until it got pretty chronic, and then I had to take a long stretch off and really let it heal up. But it gave me that perspective.
It feels like, I mean, just hearing you say that makes me think really how important it is for people to understand like how this system works, so that you can say, look, my brain's telling me to go back and work out now, even though my doctor said don't do it, and I can Google and it says stay off it for 6 weeks. And to understand your brain is telling you that because it wants that dopamine hit. If you really want to rehabilitate properly, you need to start doing other things that produce dopamine hits. And that's, I mean, fantasy sports, for example, do get really into that for the season that you're taking off, because that's you're making predictions. So that's really
not going to work.
It wouldn't work for you?
No chance.
Works for a lot of people. Yeah, play poker then. Not.
I need to be active.
Yeah, physically active.
Yeah, there has to be actual physical movement involved. Because that nervousness is a big part of my adrenaline junkie thing. Yeah, it's actual nerves. Yeah. It's like playing poker was never exciting to me, even if like people are gambling for a lot of money. Whereas playing pool is extremely exciting because there's the execution, the physical execution of things.
So you're going into flow state.
Yeah.
That's what that is, right?
It's too much. Well, I think my brain was wired with martial arts and competing, which is extremely exciting but dangerous and thrilling, and the thrills are so high. Yeah. Like the thrills of competing are just beyond anything that you can ever get from something that's non-physical, non-threatening. It's high-level problem solving with dire physical health consequences. Right. So there's all sorts of craziness involved in it, and the intensity and the focus that you need.
So you understand that guy on the skateboard really well then, actually.
Oh, yeah, too well. That's what's scary about it to me. Yeah. That could have fucking easily been me when I was 17 or 18 years old. I understand all that shit. That's why one of the things that freaks me out most about those people that are tightrope walking and doing jumping those squirrel suits where they jump off of cliffs and fly around. Oh, yeah. That doesn't always What freaks me out is that I get it. Yeah. That's what freaks me out. Yeah. Race car driving, all that shit is like, I understand what this guy's doing. Yeah. He's feeding that monster in his brain that needs to be shocked and scared and thrilled and what's next and it's like
you feel alive. I mean,
not just feel alive, but hyper alive.
Yeah,
hyper alive and a very high.
But it's funny because you were asking about focus earlier, and obviously when you go into that that intense state where there's high stakes, high risk, your attention is so super focused, right? Time slows down and you're able to see more and process more. So that could be part of, I mean, you're interested in focus because that's a part of that experience, that high, which you don't get. There's lots of highs where you're not going to have that's kind of heightened focus and attention.
There's that, and there's the state of peace that's achieved when you've overcome almost insurmountable obstacles and fear and nervousness. Everything else, like whatever weird problems that you might be dealing with your personal life, they seem so inconsequential. Like when I would have like relationship problems, like a girl I was dating, some craziness, we're about to break up, I would go spar. And I would be like, who gives a fuck?
Yeah,
you know, and you know, I remember one time having this conversation with this girl I was dating. It was like so dramatic and nonsense. I'm like, so then I guess we're breaking up? I mean, like what? What are we going to do? Like, fuck, I can't do this. Like, either we like each other or we don't like each other. Either we're going to hang out and have fun or we're not going to hang out anymore. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, oh, you're so cold. You're so...
This sounds like my early 20s. I remember that.
You fucking... You gain perspective instead of wallowing around in this. Because I think there's an addictive aspect of relationships, too. Of the breakup, makeup thing. Of the highs and the lows of, like... There are some people that are addicted to arguing in relationships.
Oh, sure. Well, falling in love is an addiction.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's literally the same process. It's the narrowing of attention on one thing. Only that person gets you that excited, gets you that
with a bunch of biological tricks engaged too, because your body's trying to get you to breed.
Yeah, and what's really, then you get the really problematic relationships when that happens for one person and not the other, and that's why you get
stalkers.
Well, you get like, but it's like it's why somebody seems, you don't understand, even if you're dating and you kind of like that person, but they're down the road, they're in love, they are addicted. And then your behavior might seem totally crazy to me because I'm not there yet. And even though I liked you, because you're further along in that process and that sort of narrowing of attention, I freak out. Whereas if, maybe if I had waited a few more weeks, I might have been far enough along that it actually doesn't scare me off. Like people who fall in love at different rates. It's not necessarily that you're a crazy person and I'm a normal person and therefore I shouldn't date you. It's just the biochemical processes look a little faster for you. I also think like there are couples who break up too soon because one of them got further along in the addiction process than the other.
What a weird way to look at it. But yeah, I mean, and also it's like the same exact person, you could meet them 6 months later and they're perfect.
Right. Yes.
Or you meet them right now.
Because maybe they have enough going on in their life that they fall in love slower.
Sure.
Right. Because you'll fall in love faster if there's nothing else getting you excited in your day. Right.
Well, it's also that term, fall in love. Like, what exactly is going on there? Like, what does that mean?
Right.
You're just syncing up whatever personality aspects that you have, holes and square pegs and round holes, and everyone's trying to figure out where everything fits in. And then there's also a weird thing where we've all had friends that alter who they are when they start dating someone.
Yeah.
It's very strange to see, too.
Yeah.
Like they'll stop talking to some of their friends or they change their behavior pretty radically. And you're like, whoa, what's going on? You're like fitting into this mold that the other person requires.
Yeah.
Like one person is either more dominant or you're both like super fucking codependent, so you need each other all the time.
Yeah.
Like I have a friend, this motherfucker can't go anywhere without his girlfriend. He doesn't do anything without her. I mean, he invite him over for a podcast, boom, brings his girlfriend. Come on over for the game. Oh, she's here too. Great. Like he doesn't go to the movies, doesn't do anything. Like
and is he happy like
he's
that?
He's a fucking mess.
No.
He's a mess. But the two of them are a mess together in this like inescapable pair.
Gotcha. But maybe they're happy. Messy happy.
Maybe.
I don't know.
I don't know either.
Say.
Well, it's what is happiness? That's strange. I mean, it's like they're not depressed. They're not jumping off bridges.
Yeah.
They're not shooting heroin.
Good. This all sounds good.
Yeah, like what is it that makes people addicted to each other? Because they most certainly get addicted to each other.
Yeah.
Like the feeling when someone breaks up with you, when you can't believe they're gone.
Yeah.
Like that is like someone's stolen something from you. Like they've stolen your happiness by taking off and just simply leaving you alone.
Yep.
Like they are a part of you. Like your whole is your whole is missing a slice.
Yeah.
Like the whole of you.
I know. That means all the metaphors that people use, it really does feel that way.
Yeah. Well, but isn't that a biological trick just to get us to breed? Like you stick around long enough to make a baby, and then, you know, fall in love with the baby so that you raise it, so that that baby can go and have a baby. And the sense of community that you have all sort of is addictive, and it keeps you together, which ensures survival.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's why cooperation feels good. It's why kindness feels good. I mean,
so tricky.
It is. And it's like, I don't know, you can, I mean, I'm a very practical person. I mean, I think I try to help people feel good. I want to feel good. You know, cooperation and kindness, you know, those things help society and help evolution, and like we're stronger together. Yeah. And it feels good. Like that's practical. And I don't mind that, you know, evolution's kind of tricking me. I mean, I have 2 babies. I have 7-month-old twin daughters. Oh, wow. And, you know, if this is a trick of biology, how I feel about them, I'm totally cool with that because it feels good. Yeah. That's biology's trick. To me, it tells me it feels good. I like it. Thank you, biology, for giving me these feelings I never had before.
Yeah, I mean, you can kind of intellectualize it down to the point where it's no longer enjoyable. Because, like, isn't life itself a trick in a sense? Because it's really temporary. No matter what, you can accumulate all the Audis and beautiful houses and boats you want, but at the end of the day, it's over. You know, like the sun rises and the sun sets, and you got a certain amount of time, and that's it. Yeah. So you could intellectualize that to the point where you're like, what's the fucking point? Yeah. I'm just going to end it now. And some people do that. Yeah. They almost get to this thing where they can't be in the moment because they don't know how long the moment lasts. And the anticipation of the moment ending is just too freaky. So they're like, fuck this, I'm out. It's sort of the same thing as my friend who can't play the video game if he's going to lose, and he pulls the plug. I mean, really, there's a lot of the same sort of qualities and characteristics of that kind of thinking. It's like there's over-intellectualizing or over-analyzing to the point where you can't even enjoy what it is.
I feel like I really want to work on this friend of yours, like video game therapy, to like. Nope. Well, it sounds like an interesting project.
He's an egomaniac. You don't want to do it. Okay. Too much problems.
I like the idea of like, how would you help somebody who can't lose, like who's a bad loser?
You should be so happy that you're trying to help him because that means you're talking about him. It's like you're focusing on him. There's a lot of but no, I mean, he's alive. He lives in America. He's not in Ethiopia living in a grass house. You know, it's like he's lucky as fuck. Yeah. You got to think. It's at a certain point in time that there's levels to like happiness and harmony, the harmony that you achieve with the environment that you find yourself in, and the more chaos that you create and the more problems that you create just to solve those problems, it's got that energy keeps you from doing something else, and that energy is going to block you from the other pursuits.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you need to take committed action towards positive things.
And in a sense, the entirety of your life is a game.
Of course. Yes, it is. I have a kind of funny story about that. You know, I did the Colbert Report a few years ago, and when you did that,
does he break character?
So, he comes not exactly. So he comes into the dressing room beforehand, and they don't do a pre-show interview because they want you to be kind of off guard and off balance. And he comes in and he says, you know, have you seen the show? Okay, I'm going to be in character, and I'm going to be really stupid and stubborn, and your job is to disabuse me of my stupid and stubborn ideas. And they said, now let me ask you a question. Is life a game? And I was like, is he practicing, you know, is this like are we practicing some kind of witty rapport for the show or whatever? So I'm trying to go into that mode, and I'm like, well, you know, yes, of course it is. And he's like, if life is a game, we spend all our time playing it, why are we so bad at it? And I'm like totally thrown off. I'm like, is he being like philosophical? I don't like, anyway, it turned out he was actually being quite philosophical. And
I'm sure he is.
He had all of these, you know, sort of thoughts about, you know, I mean, he started mentioning philosophy books he'd read and everything. And I was like, oh, okay, this is like not like a, you know, witty, like banter practice. He was like really thinking about that. And I always, I often mean to return to that question and try to come up with a better answer for him someday.
Well, it's a complicated game, and there's no instruction book. That's why we're so bad at it. I mean, it's not everybody's bad at it. You can run into people, you go, wow, this person is a really cool game going on. Yeah. You know, but it is just a game. I mean, essentially, what the problem is that there's loaded words. Like the word addiction is a loaded word. It's a loaded term. I think the word game is a loaded term too. It's a complicated series of events that you're trying to manage.
Yep.
And you're trying to manage risk and reward and benefit and the positive and negative aspects of behavior. Essentially, it's exactly the same as a game. They're completely indistinguishable.
Yeah.
It's one of them is just open-ended, and there's no clear pathway. It's a game that literally you're standing in the middle of the universe. Bam. And especially in 2015, if you have the means, you can get on a plane and go to another part of the game. You could just hop on a plane and we were talking before this podcast started about the Radiolab podcast that's out today about that guy who was on my podcast, Corey Knowlton, who shot that rhino. Like, that's a guy who took the game and decided to go to a fucking place he totally doesn't belong, or is never, is not born there or whatever. I shouldn't say doesn't belong, but a completely different area of the game. And he's doing something over there. And everybody over in this part of the game is like, what the fuck are you doing over there? Like some guy who gets on a boat and decides to sail across the world. You're like, whoa, 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 what are you doing?
Right.
Well, he decided that he's going to go to a different part of the board. And he's going to get on a boat and he's going to drink rainwater and try to catch fish and travel across the fucking ocean.
But this is interesting. Like, people are playing different kinds of games. So, like, the guy who wants to kill a rhino, that's a combat game, and the person who wants to sail around in the boat is doing exploration. It's an adventure game, and other people are doing the collection game where you're acquiring resources. And,
I think the rhino guy's doing a collection game too, in a weird way.
Right.
He's collecting bodies.
Yes. Yeah. That's true.
Yeah. And I think the guy who's on the boat is doing the collection game too, because he's collecting accolades. I've made it across the ocean.
Oh, right. Well,
like, if you make it across it,
yeah.
The real way to do it is go across the ocean. Don't tell anybody.
Right.
Where have you been
Then
for the
you
last
did it
6
just for
months?
yourself.
Just chilling, trying to find myself.
Well,
Meanwhile, you're on a boat.
When I started training for a marathon, I was like, I'm not telling anybody, because I want it to just
be internal.
Yeah, I want it to be from, because it's like this weird bias some people have about runners that they brag about it a lot, or they do it to show off.
Do you know who says that? People who wish they were running. I really believe that.
Yeah.
Because if you run, I have my friend Cameron Haynes, he's run 2 ultra marathons. And he'll, post about it on his Instagram, or he'll show you his time or something like that. But he's trying, he's an athlete and he's sponsored by a bunch of companies, and part of his gig is that he inspires people, and he really feels good about that. It's like a genuine thing that he does. Takes people running up these mountains. But you'll see these people that bitch about it. These guys he's run 100 miles in 24 hours. If that's not impressive,
it's not worth
then you need to
go
look in the mirror and find out what the fuck actually impresses you.
Yes. You post a picture of your breakfast. You can't get mad about posting that they ran.
Yeah. Look at my eggs.
Yeah.
I mean, it's why do people get upset that you say you're going to run a marathon? Why would anybody get upset? It's hard to run a marathon. You're going to run for 3.5, 4 hours, or whatever the hell your time is.
Yeah.
That's a fucking long time.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to do 20 minutes on the elliptical machine and not get bored.
Yeah.
I could keep going for a lot lot.
Yeah.
But at 20 minutes, I'm like, fuck, am I done?
Yeah.
Jesus Christ, get this over with. When someone says they ran a marathon, you start to question your own resolve.
Yes. Which is one of the reasons why to do it.
You're showing your score.
Yeah.
You're showing your game score, and people are getting pissed.
Yeah.
Look
Too
at
high
Jane.
score.
Fucking showing her high score.
Although
sometimes
I will post a terrible run because you don't want to be too inspiring that people feel like they can't do it.
Fuck those people.
No, but I'll do a slow run so that people will see hey, if you're. No, that it's
They're
okay.
tricking you into doing shitty scores. They're tricking you.
That's true. That's
Yeah.
also true.
Well, there's definitely that. There's a lot of people who, when someone will accomplish something, I'm fascinated by watching the observers. And the Instagram observers are the most fascinating, because whenever I go to someone's page, someone's done something cool, my friend Cameron running 100 miles, I'll look at the negative comments, and I go to their Instagram page, and they're almost always blocked. It's always private, locked. You have to be one of their accepted friends in order to comment on their pictures.
Interesting.
Because they're hiding.
Right.
Because they're not putting themselves
Right.
out there.
Right.
They're not showing their
Right.
life.
Which means they don't understand the vulnerability involved. Like if you had the experience of having other people write on your stuff the same way that you were doing on someone else, you might not be doing that.
Well, they're playing they're playing tic-tac-toe.
Right. Yeah.
Where someone else is out there playing chess.
Yeah.
You
That's
know?
got to be like the new like zing. Like, man, you're playing tic-tac-toe.
Yeah.
That's like
Tic-tac-toe playing motherfucker. Yeah, I mean, it is kind of what it is. If life is this really super complex, open-ended game where essentially, if you live in a free culture like we do, we're not living in North Korea where you're assigned a job, and if you don't cry when
Right.
something happens, you go to jail. Your game is essentially open-ended.
Yep.
It's not. That's one of the reasons why when people get out of jail, they find themselves like institutionalized is the word, but they find themselves so trapped in the game of jail that that's how their brain is wired. It's really extremely difficult for them to deal with the open-ended game of life.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even you see it with when someone graduates college, kids who have been from the top colleges who have been taught to play the game of achieving and achieving in this really rigid structure. And then they get out into the world and nobody's telling them, here are the things you have to do to be considered a good student or be successful. And then they just lose it.
Mm-hmm. It's too much.
Yeah, because they have not been directing their own game. Mm-hmm. Right. It's like if you haven't been designing the game, now you have to suddenly acquire that skill for yourself.
It's also one of the problems that some people have with career academics, people that never participated in the real world. They went from college to teaching college, and then they also they require these rigid standards of behavior and thinking.
I know.
And
I heard
control.
your show about that, about the Atlantic article.
It's fascinating.
Yeah. That is. Well, it's interesting because I've been so steeped in psychology literature, and a lot of the folks who play SUPERBETTER are traumatized, and they've been through PTSD, and it is absolutely true that avoiding triggers prolongs the problem. I mean, I can look at the scientific literature and say trigger warnings are actually they're not going to help. They're going to make you weaker over time. It's like we were talking about, oh, I'm so scared of the bad guy. I have to avoid everything that is a trigger. We know that that's not true. So when I hear about that, I wish. And I try to talk to people. I tweet when that article came out. I tweeted about, and I have a lot of people who follow me who are, have PTSD, and they're very conflicted about whether they're supposed to avoid triggers, and they like trigger warnings because they think it's going to keep them safe. But for everything we know, is that you need to get better at controlling your reaction to the trigger. Avoiding it doesn't help. So I can see why that's so frustrating to people.
Well, one of the most frustrating aspects of that article in particular was that what's going on in colleges today is it's a control issue.
Yeah.
They're controlling behavior in such an extreme way that they want to penalize people for microaggressions, which is like you say something and I go, all right. Which is just a part of a fucking human interaction with you. Like if I say something to you and you give me a sarcastic response, I have to decide, you know what? I don't enjoy communicating with her because she makes me feel bad. Or I have to say, maybe I'm fucking douchey and maybe people react to me in a negative way, and I should think about not what I want to say or how I want to say things, but rather how people might view what I'm saying and how they take it in. And maybe I'm just an ineffective communicator. And maybe what's going on here is just, there's like two people playing soccer. Okay, they're both trying to hit the ball and they collide into each other. Whose fault is it? It's it's just non-smooth movement.
Yep.
And that sort of interaction that you would get when you're trying to hit a soccer ball, it's very similar to the interaction that you have when two people are communicating with each other. The colliding people, one person is not necessarily totally responsible for that collision. They're both sort of responsible for it, and there's a whole dance going on with poor decision making in the moment and lack of experience and collisions and lack of an understanding of the consequences of those collisions. all that is a part of going to college.
Yes.
I mean, all that is a part of growing up. And when you have people that are shielding you from microaggressions, all that shit is just a part of being a human and dealing with your hormones and emotions. And you're separated from your family for the first time. And now you're in Michigan in some fucking crazy university, and you got some fat, stupid teacher that's never even existed outside the real world, and they're dictating your behavior patterns and telling you you're not allowed to use male and female pronouns anymore. And all this.
I like the teachers. I mean, you know, I have a lot of friends who are, you know, they teach at university. So
as do I.
I will remove the fat, stupid teacher part.
let's say skinny, smart,
brilliant, or whatever.
I'm fat, stupid. I don't even mean like physically. What I mean is just like this bloated sort of lazy entity that is creating this environment where you're establishing this artificial realm.
My guess is, looking at what's going on, this is not coming from instructors or faculty, but this is coming from the students. That this is a phenomenon.
But
I mean, it certainly was. I mean, this is definitely a younger phenomenon. It's not like something like deeply entrenched. People who came up, I mean, my professors are totally weird, like friends who are professors are totally weirded out by it, don't know how to handle it. They're not creating that culture. I mean, it's definitely something coming from the students who have been raised in this culture of, you know, I mean, it's a very protective culture, and nobody should have their feelings hurt, and everybody, you know, nobody should experience failure or rejection. I mean, I feel like it's more from that culture than from anything related to like contemporary academia or the
that's a
faculty.
Weird thing, because isn't contemporary academia overwhelmingly liberal and progressive?
I mean, I think so. I think on the political spectrum,
and when you have something that's moving in one very particular direction, oftentimes people will try to outdo themselves.
But the faculty are not in control. I mean, this is. I think the reason why a student culture would have so much impact on this is because universities are now like business models, and the customer is always right. I mean, that's not, the professor is not the one who is going to, the professors more often than not resist. It's really more at the level of the business side of the college that is trying to make, you know, this make this a good customer experience for the student. I mean, I think that is more of the divide. I don't think the political affiliations of faculty is not, I mean, none of that is really what's going on. It's really more about the students pay so much money for college now, and they expect lots of perks, and they expect they're paying for a certain experience. I think that is really where you're seeing a lot of the friction come, because this particular younger generation is seems to be, if you look at, you know, what a lot of the experts are saying, they don't want the things that feel painful or feel like failure or feel like stress.
Well, if that's the case, then why are they pointing out all these flaws in all these other people's behavior to control them, and flaws in the way people express themselves, flaws?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's part of it is obviously things need to change, right? I mean, like
what needs to change?
Well, I'm like, for instance, I'm a woman. I play games. If I log into an online video game, I don't want to be called a cunt every time I log in to play.
Does that happen a lot?
Yeah, of course.
And do you think that happens a lot because of what we talked about earlier, where the interaction of just dealing in text is very strange, and the interaction without people being right there with each other?
Yes. I mean, absolutely.
Seems like totally unnatural, right?
Yes. And people, I mean, that doesn't happen to me in real life.
Right, that's what I was going to ask. Like, how many people in real life say those things to you?
Nobody.
Never.
Yeah.
Like, how bizarre, right?
Yeah.
All of a sudden you enter into this world. So isn't that a function almost of the world itself being completely unnatural, more so than the people being any different in that world?
I'm not sure. But I mean, so all of that is to say there are things that people say and do in everyday life that are legitimately offensive.
Sure.
And I mean, I don't use the terminology microaggressions. I don't use the trigger warning terminology. So I think we're like in this period where, on one hand, things do need to change in some ways. You know, you have Nobel laureate scientists giving speeches where they say that he doesn't like to have women in the lab because either they fall in love with you or you fall in love with them, and then you can't work together. I mean, when a Nobel laureate says that to a conference of young scientists, that's not helpful, I don't think. But I wouldn't.
That was taken out of context. Do you know the full extent of his phrase? Like, it was a joke, and he was also talking about his wife, and because he met his wife in the lab, and he was also making himself to be a fool. It was very self-deprecating. Do you know the extent of it?
I did read some sort of reassessment of that.
Yeah, Dawkins printed a full version of what he said, and it's very different.
Yeah.
And also, everyone was laughing.
I read the full version. Yeah. But so it's like, so this is actually a perfect example, because so if he was joking, right? So his intentions are totally good. Is it possible that it's still not helpful to make that kind of a statement? I think that's what people are talking about, right? If on one hand there's a lot of interest in trying to increase the number of women in science and technology, is it possible that somebody would hear that and still be kind of demotivated by it, or kind of have that sink in? So I think people are, when we're discussing these things, you don't have to police other people's language, but I still think it's useful to say that might not be helpful.
Yeah, there's an article on the leaked transcript. What happened was the people that saw it thought it, like at least some of them thought it was funny, but there were aspects of what he said that were probably clumsy or clunky, or he was trying to be funny, and he's really just sort of an odd guy who's a scientist. Yeah. And people decided that this is an awesome target. Like, let's go after it. Right,
and should make an example. Yeah. Which happens on the whole, people get shamed on the internet now. That's what happens. I don't have any expertise in this area, so it's probably not, worth me opining about it.
This is an official quote. He says, "It's strange that such a chauvinist monster like me has been asked to speak to women scientists. Let me tell you about my trouble with girls." His trouble with girls. 3 things happen when they're in the lab. You fall in love with them, they fall in love with you, and when you criticize them, they cry. Perhaps we should make separate labs for boys and girls. Now, seriously, I'm impressed with the economic development of, hold on a second, this is fucked up here. Of Korea. See, it was him joking.
Yeah, but he's joking, playing on stereotypes that girls cry and girls can't handle criticism. I mean, I'm just saying I'm not going to say that I think it's totally fine to say, hey, when you say these things, it might result in some girl thinking, wait, maybe I'm not going to be a good scientist because people say that girls aren't good in the lab or whatever. It's just, I wouldn't say it. I wouldn't say it. And I try to be, even when we say things like about people who play games a lot, they're wasting their lives. Why don't you go out and do something real? I don't think that's useful to say either. I think that that's actually can be really damaging to people's self-identity.
Anytime you generalize, men do this and women do that, and girls aren't good at being in the lab, and it's damaging. And I think now he understands that a joke like that, as innocent as he might have intended it to be, when you're reading it in a text form, especially, and you're taking some of it out of context, it can be offensive. It can be hurtful for someone who's considering, like, how many girls were reading that were considering a possible career in science, when I don't have to deal with fucking people like this. Like, I'm not going to cry in your lab, asshole. I just want to do work. I want to be a scientist. Yeah.
So we don't need to, like, police people to have this conversation of, so that's,
well, it does sort of expose, in some ways, it exposes prevalent attitudes. That this guy, who is this esteemed Nobel-winning scientist, has this attitude, that he thinks it's funny to joke around about it. Like, even if he's not a sexist or a bad guy, him making this joke about himself being some chauvinist monster. Yeah. And it's because, one of the things is because his wife is a prominent feminist, and so he jokes around about him being a chauvinist monster.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense.
Yeah. But, I mean, it's all out of context, and it's all also, you're dealing with a guy who's whose real focus is his research, not social interaction.
Right.
He's not like a nuanced speaker.
Yeah.
He's not a guy who is a carefully considered speaker who gets on stage and thinks about everything and the impact of all. I mean, he, like we were talking about, like the awkward interaction that people might have in college. Well, this guy's awkward interaction is him being forced to write a speech. Like, if he did this a bunch of times, he'd probably get really way better at it. And if you sat down with him alone and you guys were just talking over a glass of wine, maybe you'd understand how his brain works better.
Yeah.
Maybe I would as well.
Which would have been more useful. I mean, if something offends you, it's more useful to have a conversation about it than to just start, you know.
Yeah, but it's fun to blog and shit all of this guy.
I know.
He's old and he's white. He's famous, or he's
somebody will write a book about the neurochemistry of outrage soon, because it's its own high. You know,
it's recreational. Recreational outrage is without a doubt a real thing right now.
Yeah.
And I think that that's what's going on in colleges, and that people are finding. When you're in college, it's like when you were talking about the addiction that people have to video games, and one of the things that sort of stimulates that addiction is if you're trying to avoid things in your regular life.
Right.
Well, if you are in college, the overwhelming anxiety of being a young person who has gone from living with their parents, going to high school, now you're in college, and you're just a couple years away from the cliff of real world. Like, you're fucking sliding towards it, and you're trying to define it and redefine it and change it and establish yourself. And then along the way comes things that you can be angry at. Well, you will point your fucking fury, a really unmeasured or unbalanced fury at those things where it doesn't necessarily make sense, but it makes sense to you because what you're really doing is you're avoiding the angst of social anxiety, of sexual rejection, and all the shit that makes a person feel weird things, and you channel that towards microaggressions, or you channel that towards someone deciding to address you with a male or a female pronoun. You know, there's a lot of weirdness to being a person, and that.
But you know, the last thing I want to say about this is, part of it is I think people are just trying to make new rules for the game, right? You know, and when you're trying to change the rules of a game, that is really upsetting if you're in the middle of the game. You're playing a game and someone's like, wait, totally, you can't do that now. Or
it's
that's
he
not
and she. We've always been he and she.
Yeah. It's like, oh, you're playing soccer. You can't kick the ball anymore with your feet. Like, and you're in the middle of the game.
Right.
So, but it doesn't mean, as a game designer would say, it doesn't mean that there isn't a better game that actually could have different rules. But it's really upsetting to be in the middle of a game and have somebody say, wait, those aren't the rules.
Yes.
So, you know, maybe we should, I don't know how to do it better, because, I mean, look, I'm a progressive person, and I'm glad that things are changing in society in lots of ways, you know, that I'm excited about.
Like, what makes you happy? Like, what do you think is good about the changes in society in a progressive way?
Well, I'm really glad that we have marriage equality now. I'm really excited about that. I'm glad that, paternity and maternity leave, you know, becoming more people having longer maternity leave and the same length paternity leave for dads. As a new parent, really excited to see companies doing that. And I like that we're starting to talk about income inequality. I mean, optimistic that there will be changes in that direction. And I think that the Black Lives Matter is a hugely important movement. I think there's a lot of conversations going on right now where people are angry or have struggled or feel like they've been playing a rigged game. And so it's not going to be pleasant, and not all the tactics are going to be effective or good either. But
the general attitude is definitely moving in a more progressive direction.
I think so. And even as somebody who has been, you know, I've had Twitter, you know, hordes yelling at me because they thought that I was breaking one of the new rules of how we're supposed to.
Like, what did people yell at you over?
So one of the big instances I had was about my recommendations for playing Tetris after a trauma. So there have been multiple randomized control studies now out of Oxford University showing that if you play Tetris within 24 hours of a traumatic event, it will reduce the flashbacks you have, the severity of flashbacks, and other PTSD symptoms, because it occupies your brain and prevents your brain from kind of locking in an obsessive compulsive way. on the trauma, right? So this is, I think this is incredibly important advice that everyone should know, kind of like stop, drop, and roll. You know, if you catch on fire, you know what to do. Everybody should have Tetris on their phone and have it available to them. Because I know, having suffered flashbacks from my own head injury, I would have nightmares of which I was hitting my head, and I would feel it as if it were real, and I'd wake up and I'd be convinced that I had hit my head in the middle of the night, and was going to have this experience all over again. Just nightmares constantly. So I know how bad it's going to be. I won't be able to do it. When I started tweeting about it, I got told that there needed to be like trigger warnings on my tweets because I was mentioning PTSD, and I might make somebody think about like a trauma that they'd experienced. And
well, they're trying to change the game.
Yeah. So it's like, I've been on the other side of it where people have said that I'm doing it wrong. But at the same time, I recognize there are people who are suffering or angry, or they have been at a disadvantage because of the way the game is rigged. And so I'm okay with this. There being like, we're all going to be uncomfortable for a while as these things change. And that's,
So you're uncomfortable with being unjustly accused of being insensitive when you're bringing out the scientific research that shows that a game can help you with trauma.
Yeah, I mean, I
you're
think
fine with that.
I'm going to keep doing it, but I understand that the people who say it are hurting. The people who are telling me that I'm triggering them.
But that's so irrational. I think that all irrational behavior like that should either be ignored or shit on. I really do. I just think it's dangerous. I think it's dangerous when it gets pointed out. Like you're pointing out the scientific aspects of a very specific activity that's very good for trauma, and they're saying that you shouldn't talk about this.
I know.
That's nonsense.
Well, that's why I still talk about it.
Right.
But I don't have to get into a fight with them about it.
No, you certainly don't. You should ignore them.
Right.
Or shit on them, depending on how you feel.
Yeah.
But I think that there's definitely I like how we're defining life as like a giant game or as equal to a giant game, because I think that's what's going on also with the negative reaction to progressive thinking now. Like I was tweeting something about this woman in Kentucky that was trying to stop people from getting gay marriage licenses.
Right. Yeah.
And I took a few days where I wasn't paying attention to Twitter that much, and I didn't know that there was this giant movement supporting this woman.
Oh, yeah.
And I went to Mike Huckabee's fucking Twitter page and saw that this crazy old asshole was like saying that there's a war against Christians and that like hashtag religious liberty. And so I was like, that doesn't have religious liberty doesn't mean you enforce your religion on other people.
Right.
Like that's so crazy.
Yeah.
And there was so much blowback. I got so many people tweeting at me,
Really?
angrily tweeting at me for saying like, and I tweeted something about Ted Cruz, about how ridiculous his views are on gay marriage and like that he's probably gay. And I'm like, if you listen to the way that guy talks, he's super feminine. Like there's like, how many times do we have to see this where these men, because I have a bit that I used to do in my act that there's two types of people that hate gay marriage. It's either you're really dumb or you're secretly worried that dicks are delicious. Those are the people. And like this guy is like, there's something going on here. Like why does he care so much about two people that are in love but watching the people that are angry that the game is being redefined?
Yes, that's it.
And there was all this Christian stuff that was attached to it. Like, well, guess what else it says not to do in the Bible? It says not to get divorced. Like this same lady has been divorced 3 times. She's on her 4th marriage. Guess what else it says? You're not supposed to have tattoos. Okay? All these people are tattooed with religious symbols on them. You got a cross on your arm and you tattooed it. You got to read the whole book. like, this is crazy. Like the things that they choose, and what it is they're trying to define the world that they're playing in.
Yeah.
They're trying to define the game.
And I think it's important because even though I might disagree, I mean, I vehemently disagree with people whose perspectives seem to be fueled by hate. But I think it's important to still try to have the empathy or the mental insight to understand why does this make them feel so bad. And I think what you just said, the feeling that you thought you understood the rules. I mean, religion is a set of rules. Yes. You thought you understood it. You're playing the game right. You're doing it right. And it is psychologically distressing to have somebody else tell you we're playing a different game.
Yeah.
Your game sucks. And you're not going to be able to play it anymore. I try to understand where those feelings are coming from, because if you're going to change people's minds, you have to I think you have to acknowledge that they are really in distress about this. You know, they're not doing this just to be jerks. I mean, this change is painful to them.
But why are they in distress about something that doesn't directly affect them? That's where it gets weird.
But it's because of what you just said, because they have committed to a framework, a set of rules, and put that's once you're in it, you're in it. And you know, when you're playing a game, you always try to stop the cheaters and you protect the boundaries of the game. That's the mindset you get into. And they think they're just doing what comes naturally.
This is a country that was established by Christian values.
Yes.
The fucking game's locked.
Yes.
Okay, you can't change the rules.
That's it.
It really does seem like we've kind of touched on something here.
Yeah.
This has been a really good one for me. The overall looking at the whole existence as instead of defining it by the word game, but looking at it with almost the same sort of attitude or approach that you would look at a game.
Yeah.
Is very beneficial.
Good. It's worked for me.
Your eyes got big like saucers. You did it. You did it. You scored. You made it happen. Yeah, I think also like the ebb and flow of culture, like the things that seem to definitely even though I resist like this nonsense about microaggressions and trigger warnings and stuff like that, I'm very happy that things are moving in the direction of acceptance.
Yeah.
Very happy that, you know, like you can be whatever the fuck you want. You decide you're a woman today, go ahead. As long as you don't hurt anybody, who cares? This guy wants to wear dresses and he wants you to call him Jane now. Fine. Okay. You know, these two guys want to get married to each other. Terrific. You know, these two people want to stop wearing makeup and they want to, what do you give a shit? Who cares? Yeah. Who cares? Or they want to dye their hair blue. That's fine too. Like, eventually we'll all figure out that we are all just unique individuals that are a part of this gigantic superorganism. Mm-hmm. And the most conducive way or the most harmonious way for us to interact with each other is to fuck with each other's path the least. Whatever path you're on your way in your game, as long as it doesn't like negatively affect people, as long as you're not a destroyer, you're not out there, your path is to burn down other people's houses, your path is to steal, your path is to hurt people. As long as that's not going on, why care? Yeah. And then ultimately, once that is established, I think then we will focus on, okay, well, what are our real issues? Our real issues aren't gay people getting married to each other. Our real issues are the people that actually are burning houses down, the people that are stealing. Like, these are the real issues that people have. People that are not microaggressions, but actual aggressions. People that are actually committing crimes against each other. People that and why are they doing that? Well, what is wrong with their game? What happened to them? Like, what series of events have placed them in this sort of position?
Yeah. Because it's not, I mean, people don't get into that in a vacuum.
No. I think that's also something you realize once you have children, like you have now. And as a father, one of the things that's changed radically in my life is seeing people now. Like, when I meet people, I see them as babies that have grown up. Like, I don't see them as being in a static state. You know, and it's very strange. Like, even assholes that I meet, I look at them and I even go, that guy's a fucking asshole. I think of them as like, what happened to that person?
Well, you know, that's like I practice Zen Buddhism, and that's like one of the big Buddhist meditations is to picture people as babies. Like, when you feel hate for somebody, try to visualize them all the way down to their little baby self and picture what they look like as a baby, and to think about who they were when they were that baby before all of life happened to them to make them into somebody that has now triggered these, you know, hate feelings of anger.
Well, it's also in the womb. You know, I was talking to Michael Irvin, who's a famous pro football player, who's talking to me about kids that grow up in horrible environments, dangerous, volatile environments, where the mother has all this cortisol in her brain while the child's in the womb, and the kid literally grows up like with a short temper.
Yeah.
They literally, they're developed out of the womb,
Yes.
like constantly worried about stress and danger.
Yeah. Hypervigilant. Yeah. All of that.
I've had feral cats. I had a cat that was feral that I raised, and he was fucking terrified of everything from the time he was a baby.
Yeah.
And I locked myself in a room with him when he was a kitten because it was the only way to like bond with him. I
Right.
stayed with him for like I just put a bunch of books in the room and cat food and a litter box. I'm like, you and me, dude, we're hanging out. And when I come near him, and he'd be like, he'd just jump on the walls, and like you'd never seen anything like a feral kitten. I mean, he was really little too, just a couple months old. And when I would get to him and pick him up, he would start purring, like finally somebody loves me.
It's like,
But then when you put him down, like the same cat would just
Yeah.
be, because his brain was programmed from the time he was a little baby.
Yeah.
And there was not a lot he could do. I couldn't say, that cat's an asshole. Well, no,
Right.
that fucking
Yeah.
cat was born under an apartment building, you know, and his mom was like running away from traffic and trying to eat rats or whatever the fuck they could kill.
yeah. Well, I think this is one of the reasons why game thinking is so powerful, because you just zoom out and see the bigger structure.
Yes.
That it's there's always a bigger game and more pieces in play, and you're getting other people's, you know, strategies or actions or you know, or the rules, you know, and being able to zoom out and see that makes you feel, I think, well, you have more perspective, more wisdom, and maybe more compassion for other people.
That's also why people like to, rightly so, criticize very narrow-minded small town thinking.
Yeah.
Small little environments, insulated
Right.
environments that are very, you know, very criticizing or very, you know, just have their way set, and they don't have a wide variety of experiences they can draw upon, or they don't have a broad, nuanced view of the board that they're playing
Yes.
on.
Yeah. So this is giving me a lot of food for thought about, I mean, the links between social change and gameful thinking. There's something there.
There's something there. I think also as time is going on, and this is one thing, the positive aspects of social media and of the internet itself is that we're getting more and more information instead of just accepting these preconceived notions that we have about different groups of people. Now we're being exposed to so much data. It's just inadvertently or inarguably changing the way we view those groups.
Yeah.
And that you're forced to, like when you see like this Black Lives Matter thing, you see all these peaceful protests where these people are talking eloquently and speaking and showing video after video of police brutality. And then I had a cop on, Michael Wood, who was a retired Baltimore police officer, that very openly talked about the institutionalized racism and about how they had found papers from the 1970s that were describing how to behave in certain environments that were exactly the same as what's going on now. He's like, this is a fucking system.
Yes, it's a
This
system.
and
That's right, yeah.
I don't think that attitude existed just a few years ago. I think
Yes.
people are looking at all that data now and
Yes.
they go, it's slowly coming around. And even the hardliners are dropping, you know, if they were at a 10, now they're at an 8 or a 7. Well, fucking kids, you need to go to school or something. You know, it's like everyone is sort of slowly recognizing the pieces that are in play. It's a lot more complicated than we want to, you know, just narrowly sort of define them in these really simplistic terms where it's not simple. There's a series of interactions that are going on all over the globe where human beings are trying to find their way, and they're also realizing somewhere along the line that their parents weren't these all-knowing creatures. Neither were their parents, neither were the President Roosevelt or fucking Abe Lincoln. They were all people that were trying to find their way as well.
Yeah.
And this is a group effort. It's a group effort that's still going on, and it's not even remotely done. It's not even close.
Yeah. So it's okay. So instead of seeing the bigger picture, we will see the bigger game, and that will guide us.
Yes, bring it all right back to Super Better. All right, you got to get out of here. You got to catch a flight. So thank you very much. I'll put your video up on Twitter, and we'll put the link to your book, which is available right now, right?
Well, it drops next Tuesday, but you can buy it now.
Oh, you can buy it now, and but you can get it next Tuesday.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank
really,
you,
really
Jeff.
appreciate it. All right, and what's your Twitter address again?
It's Avant Game, AVANTGAME. You can just search for my name, Jane Games. It'll come up.
All right, beautiful. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Awesome time.